If you feel more comfortable speaking in Welsh or you'd like to speak in Welsh, please do so, if we have translation. Those of you at home, please be aware that there is translation for yourselves, and please check the system now before we start the meeting. That takes us through to item 1 on the agenda. We'll go quickly over to Dave just to do a roll call, and that will inevitably formulate our apologies for absence. So, Dave, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Members are familiar with the system. I'll call your name and then indicate that you are present, and I will indicate any apologies, and then I'll go through the officers. So, without further ado, first to mention Councillor Gwynfor Thomas, the Chair.
Yes, good morning, present.
Thank you. And then Councillor John Davis, Deputy Chair.
Yeah, but it happens or not.
Thank you. Councillor Kim Broom.
Just there.
I know. Councillor Broom. Sure she's there, but I would like it if she could.
Sorry, looking for the mute. I was trying to do the translation, so it had gone down to minimum, so I am here, present.
Good, thank you. Councillor Emlyn Shivoni. Councillor Shivoni. Okay, not with us for the time being. Councillor Tina Higgins.
Rwy yma, diolch.
Thank you. Councillor Hugh Shepherdson.
Good morning, present.
You. Councillor Gwyn Evans.
Present all.
You. Councillor Gareth Lloyd.
Presennol, will have to tender my apologies. I might have to slip out for a bit at 11. I'm waiting a phone call. Diolch.
Thank you very much. Councillor Patience Bentu.
Present, and just to register my apologies, Chair, that I would have to leave at 12 o'clock and won't be attending the afternoon session due to some work pressures. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Sam Bennett.
Present.
Thank you very much. Councillor Andrew Williams.
Present.
Thank you. Just to announce to everyone, Councillor Shivoni has just joined us in person, so welcome, Councillor Shivoni.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Victoria Holland has sent her apologies. Councillor Lyndon Jones.
President, I may have to just leave for a short time because I'm waiting for a plumber to arrive, much needed.
Good luck with that. Rare occasion. Okay, thank you. Councillor Sam Pritchard.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon Walker.
Present.
Councillor Edwin Roderick.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Glyn Preston. Councillor Preston. Okay. Councillor Sarah Williams. No, Councillor Williams. Okay. Councillor Matthew Crowley. We did get an indication that he may not be attending. Is that correct, Howard?
Apologies for afternoon. I couldn't look up who was his apologies.
Well, as far as I can see, he's not here now, so we'll have to not credit him with attendance. Councillor Crowley. Councillor Dan Thomas. Councillor Thomas. Okay, moving on. Councillor Carl Jordan has sent his apologies. And there's also Councillor Sharon Freegard. Councillor Emlyn Williams. I'm sure I saw Councillor Williams. Elwyn. Yeah, sorry. Elwyn, yes. I always say that. Keep it. Emlyn Hughes. I saw Councillor Elwyn. Okay, Councillor Elwyn Williams. Howard, can you perhaps chase Councillor Williams? Because I'm sure I saw him earlier on.
Yeah, he's not in the call at the moment, so I think he must have dropped.
Anything can happen. Okay, thank you. Councillor David Bryan.
Present.
Very much. And Councillor Mark Tiernan. Yeah, Tiernan.
Present.
Thank you very much. So that concludes the roll call for councillors. Chair, if I can now move on to officers. On my left, Chief Fire Officer Roger Thomas.
Present.
Thank you. Then Deputy Chief Fire Officer Ewan Cray.
Present.
Thank you. Then myself, Monitoring Officer Clark David Daycock. Assistant Chief Fire Officer Craig Flannery.
Good morning. Present.
Thank you. And Assistant Chief Officer Midrian Harris.
Present.
Section 151 Officer Sarah Mansbridge.
Present.
Thank you. Area Manager Justin Lewis.
Present.
Thank you. Area Manager Peter Greenslade.
Present.
Thank you. Area Manager Geraint Thomas.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Sean Lloyd. Not Councillor Sean Lloyd. Area Manager Sean Lloyd.
Present.
Very pleased with yourself there, Sean. Corporate Head of Resources Kerry Jackson.
Apologies.
Okay, thank you. Head of Finance Stephen Phillips. Thank you. Head of Community Risk Management Richard Felton. No.
Present.
Oh, thank you, Richard. Head of Human Resources Mark Miles.
Good morning. Present.
Thank you. Head of Procurement Helen Rees.
Present.
Data Protection Officer Stephen Beckett.
Good morning. Present.
Thank you. Temporary Head of Corporate Communications and Business Development Officer Alan Lewis.
Good morning. Present.
Thank you. And last but not least, Angharad Hawkes. Thank you. And we've been informed that Councillor Elwyn Williams is definitely with us.
Yes, that's awesome.
He's a bit nippy. He's a bit
All right, Elwyn.
He's a bit laid back. But
I think Elwyn's having trouble. He looks as if he's in a frozen situation.
Yeah.
in a IT sense.
Yes.
Chair.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Good.
Thank you. I think that's everyone. Anyone who's missed? No. Okay, thank you, Chair. And I suppose it flows neatly into the apologies. Shall I do that?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, I think, as I said, we've had a number of apologies. Victoria Holland, Councillor Victoria Holland, Councillor Linden, Councillor Linden is here, Councillor Matthew Crowley, Councillor Glyn Preston, Councillor Sarah Williams, and Councillor Jan Thomas, Councillor Carl Jordan, and Councillor Sharon Freegard. I think that deals with all the apologies, Chair.
Members, that's the apologies given. Any others to add to that? I don't think so, is there? No, happy to move on then. Declaration on item 2 on your agenda, declaration by members of any personal prejudicial interest. Just have some advice of the monitoring officer.
Thank you, Chair. Initially, I would say and invite all members to declare a personal interest by virtue of anything on the agenda that relates to or affects their constituent authority. So if members could verbally agree that, Chair. Thank you. And I would also invite members to declare personal interest in relation to item 5, which is the budget, item 13, draft annual report of the IRPW, Independent Remuneration Panel for Wales, and also item 14, the members' draft allowance scheme and claim forms. So if members could agree that and confirm them all in writing, Chair, that'd be very helpful.
Everybody happy?
Agreed.
Members, anything else? Anybody else has got anything to declare? Is our responsibility? If not, we'll move on. And we'll move on to item 3 on the agenda, Chair's announcements. A warm welcome to Martin Beale, who's joining us today. He's Chair of the Standards Committee. That'll be an agenda item later in the meeting, but welcome to you, sir. And remind members that there is a briefing at 2 o'clock in relation to private matters by VWV. So that is at 2 p.m. It won't take too long, so if members can hang on for that, I'd be very grateful. Just a quick reminder that it is the Fire Service Carol service on Thursday evening in Welshpool. Nice to see some fellow members there if they wish to attend. That'd be great. And I'm going to hand over to Craig now
Chair,
to
should we remind members?
just on it.
Okay. The other thing I was going to suggest you remind them of is that we've kindly had some
Oh yes,
mince pies and cakes.
members will remember Councillor Jan, one of our Swansea councillors who used to be a member of this authority. She hasn't forgotten us, and she has kindly sent over some mince pies. And luckily, I'm sitting by the door, so I'll beat any member to them before you do. But we will thank. I will drop a note to Jan to thank her for remembering us and clear out high regard. And those of you, her colleagues down there, please. Pass on our thanks as well. As usual, I remember there was Bailey's mince pies last year, so let's hope so. I hope I made you all jealous online anyway. So we're going to have quite a feast here when we have a break. So thanks to Jan for that. We'll go over to operational matters now. Thank you, Craig.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So just to give you a bit of an update, it has been quite a busy time for us, as you no doubt been aware from the news. In terms of over the last fortnight, we've had two major storms that have hit us with different effects across both our area and also our neighbours area in South Wales. So the first one being Storm Bert, and brought quite a lot of widespread flooding with 41 flood incidents specifically across Mid and West Wales area. But just to give you a flavour of how that looks operationally when the storms do come in, between the hours of 5 a.m. and 9 a.m. that morning, we received 311 calls over that 4-hour period. So, you know, we talk about spate conditions when the storm hits and all of a sudden it's all hands to the deck. And it's certainly what it was that morning. To a point where we instigated Ops Willowbeck. Now, Ops Willowbeck is a terminology used where we then BT pushed through some of our calls to other fire controls. It's a mutual assistance arrangements that are set up. And what it does, it enables different fire controls to withstand spate conditions within their own areas. So on that day, as Bert moved through, 21 fire and rescue service control areas assisted with calls until Ops Willowbeck was stood down that evening. So just to give you a flavour, when things like that happen, a national coordination effort stands in. Just in terms of that then, so that was Storm Bert. I'll give you some stats on that in a second. Then shortly afterwards, we had Storm Dara, and that affected Mid and West area with much more widespread flooding, power outages and dangerous structures. And you'll be aware that the weather warnings for both Storm Bert and Storm Dara were different. You know, we had a red wind warning, which we don't often get in terms of Storm Dara. And with that then, a big focus was made on all our coastal areas of the service and many areas inland. And I'll talk to you about a little bit of preparedness that happens when these kind of warnings come through. Just in terms of Storm Dara then, in terms of Ops Willowbeck, the equivalent, we actually took 71 calls during Storm Dara for Northwest Fire Control. So you can see that mutual collaboration coming through. And some of you may have seen from the news that during Storm Dara, a major incident was declared in the Dyfed-Powys area due to the significant power outages and communication issues. And when a major incident is declared as a statutory member within the Civil Contingencies Act, we then go and provide further assistance into what we call strategic coordination groups and tactical coordination groups. And these are multi-agency groups that are set up to deal with major incidents. Okay, so we had quite a lot going on all at the same time, not just dealing with our own incidents, but dealing with meeting requirements to help as a multi-agency part of the jigsaw piece. So flood areas and damage are very different, as I said, between the two storms. From Bert's perspective, we were going to landslides, to sinkholes, to power cuts. And during Storm Dara, that was very much a case of flood rescue. And just to give you a flavour of that, during Storm Dara, across Wales, within that period of time, over that kind of 36-hour period, we received 1,100 fire and rescue calls across that weekend. And as I said, assisting North Wales by taking 71 of those. 312 were for dangerous structures, of which nearly 200 were in the Mid and West area. And we did actually attend about 60 internal flooding events, 19 external flooding, And within all that, a number of flood rescues taken from people that become stranded in vehicles, what we call life risk calls as well. So quite a stormy couple of weeks, if you pardon the pun, from a flood response perspective. And just remind the authority, and probably the Chief will mention this a little bit, that you put 13 additional wading stations into play about 18 months ago. The majority of those were out during Stormvert and Storm Dara. And it just goes to show how, as we evolve our kind of emergency rescue response, how it was needed with that climate change agenda. The final thing, moving on from storms then into our normal kind of fire perspective, and it's a saddening news. On the December the 11th, service crews from Tregaron, Lampeter, Aberaeron and Aberystwyth fire stations were called to an incident in Drafach in Llanybydr. Crews responded to a 2-storey domestic property that was well alight on their arrival and fully involved in fire. And as per the norm with this type of incident, crews got to work immediately using hose reel jets, 45mm jets, portable pumps for water requirements, and also thermal imaging cameras to extinguish the fire. Sadly, one man died at the scene. As you would expect with this kind of tragic nature, an investigation is now underway to find out the cause of death, and we're working very closely with Scenes of Crime and Derby Parish Police in that regard. Internally, Area Manager Peter Greenslade has set up a significant fire review where we look at all aspects from our response, prevention, protection arrangements there. So quite a lot has gone on, Chair, but hopefully that gives a succinct flavour of what we've been up to the last few weeks. Happy to take any questions if there are.
Thank you, Craig. I'm just going to go over to the Chief now, just to add a little bit more, please.
Yeah, and I'll touch on the sort of presentations I've done into local authorities, but it does bring it home to you when I've talked about one of the features of that presentation was centred on climate change and the impact of that. And I think we've seen that sort of writ large over the last few weeks of the impact. And the impact it has disproportionately as us as fire and rescue service in terms of the widescreen flooding, the impacts on communities and the draw on us and significant draw on our resources all at the same time does impact on us. The other feature as well, just to make you aware of, you will have had been subject to the emergency alert system, which will have responded on your mobile phones for about 10 or 12 seconds, a loud alarm that came through as well. So that's something that's been put in place in the last couple of years. First time it's been used in Wales, and it is there for that purpose to alert people for, in this case, a red alert in and around the weather conditions as well. But that's something that, like I say, we can probably get more used to going forward. It does it on a sort of geographical basis, depending on what communities are affected as well. But you should have all had that alert come through to your mobile phones. I know it's been a bit patchy in certain places. Some people have had it a number of times, some haven't had it at all. But it is a way the government will alert communities now to an issue of significant impact and importance across the organisation. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you both. Yes, it does bring it home when we have incidents like this, but it does demonstrate the capability that we do have in our service, and we pass on them thanks to everybody. The incident in Ceredigion, very sad. We just happened to be in Ceredigion the following day, and there was significant praise for our firefighters that day from councillors in the room. So yes, it's very sad to hear, but it wasn't due to the lack of effort from our firefighters. So if you could pass on the regards of the Ceredigion councillors to the officers, we'd be very grateful. Members, just a quick opportunity for questions. Councillor Gordon.
There was a fire on the 3rd of December in Morristown, Cymru, Cymru in Morristown. What I'd like to know is, why are we sending 6 fire appliances to an house fire and it was just a bedroom fire? Not only that, I'd like to know why, the reason why I'm bringing this up, a friend's son's house is directly next door to it. I asked him, did they enter next door to prevent the fire coming across? And he said for 25 minutes that he was there, nobody went into his house to stop the fire coming through the common in front. Why are we sending 6 appliances to an house fire now, whereas it used to be just 2?
I haven't got the detail on that, but I'm happy to provide that as an answer to the question outside of the meeting, and in fact make everybody aware. Unless one of the area managers has got any specific detail or who were on duty on that particular day?
I'm happy to come in there, Craig and Chair. I'm happy to look at the detail. I was made aware of a Make Pumps 5, and I believe there's some dynamic mobilising done by Joint Fire Control. This is because of the repeat calls that were coming in, so they did add more appliances to the PDA due to repeat calls coming in and flames issuing. But I'm more happy to go in more some of the detail and feedback to Councillor Walker if you wish, Chair.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. If you can get back to Councillor Gordon following the meeting.
And the reason why I asked, because the house next door, the detached house, was heavily flooded in the end. No damage caused.
Okay, we'll find some more information out for you, Councillor Gordon, and update you after the meeting.
Sorry,
yeah, go on.
Just in terms of that, I think we have to allow, and without getting into the detail of this incident, allow whoever has attended, and based on information coming into control, we always encourage our control staff and our operational staff to get the resources there. Given the travel distances within our communities, we will get them on the road and then stand them down if not required. You know, not on in every incident, but our PDA, as you say, our predetermined attendance, which is a term we use within our mobilising policy, will determine what is required for a standard incident. But that can be flexed up and down depending on requirements. But if the information is coming from callers coming in, and it appears that it's perhaps more than a straightforward house or domestic dwelling, then we have that scope to increase that. But we'll get into the detail and we'll find out. We'll share that with yourselves.
Because it's the third fire and that's actually happened, some similar to what's actually happened. They're not committed to the next door.
Okay. Well, I'm not aware of that.
No, I don't. I'm not going to go to spot.
But if you share that information with you, we'll have a look at that.
Great.
Okay.
Chair, if I may, just quickly, just add to that, I think it's of interest to the members really with regard to response to operational incidents as such. There is that we have got an assurance process in place within the service that we would follow up on a sample of these incidents to assess why such questions as what Councillor Walker has raised there. And that was applauded recently by the advisor in a recent inspection. So I think that's worth noting, in that we don't just leave these things, and we do follow up on them from an assurance point of view for the service as a whole, to make sure that we get the best approach and the best response possible. So,
yeah, Councillor Edwin.
Are you going to take the translator on board?
Yeah.
Sorry, dim ond ryw wythnos nôl o'r stor yma, ond oedd unrhyw fath o argymell i triadol yn oedd e. A dwi eisiau wedi... It's working.
Mine's working, yeah?
Yeah, okay. Na, felly oedd e'n argymell i triadol, a dwi'n diolchgar iawn i'r Rhagfyr hefyd y staff am ymateb mor prydlon. Hefyd i ni, fel aelodau, i cael y gwybodaeth yna, ni'n cael e-byst yn rheolaidd. Mae'n am o'r ardal yn gweud wrth ni beth oedd wedi digwydd, beth oedd ymateb, a felly ni'n diolchgar iawn am hwnna. Falch i clywed, bod ni wedi colli rai bywydau. Ni'n siŵr bydd y sefyllfa yn lot fawr gyda'r siarad tân a gwaith Gyfarfod yn gwneud. Diolch yn fawr i pawb.
Thank you, Councillor Amlin. Please pass that on as well, please, Craig. That would be grateful. One final opportunity. Anybody else got anything on those operational matters which we just discussed? No, thank you. Thank you, Craig. Roger, anyone? Members, we move on to item 4 in the agenda, and it's the minutes of our 23rd of September. They're pages 3 to 12 in your pack. They're documented there. Members, just for accuracy, any comment? No? Are you happy that they are signed as a true and correct record? Thank you, Councillor Roger, Councillor Edwin. Members, just for any matters arising, pages 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and very little on page 12. Members, any matters arising from those minutes? No, I'm judging on your silence. We'll move on. Thank you very much. Item 5 on your agenda is the medium-term financial plan. Members, we've had significant discussion in relation to this since last July. We've got to this point now. I do encourage you, if you've got questions after we've been taken through the report, it's pages 13 to 48. Please ask. No question is a stupid one, and I'm quite keen that we give this as much challenge as we can give. We'll go over to the chief first, just for an introduction, and then we'll go over to Sarah, our 151 officer, to take us through some of the detail. Roger, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, members. I appreciate this has been a quite a long, protracted process, as it always is, as it needs to be, in terms of scrutiny of budgets, which are key in terms of our future planning and ensuring that we have the resources available to not only enact our statutory duties, but also, in the words of the framework, to provide a comprehensive service across our communities. So it's central to those key tenets of what we work to. So it has been a long process, and just as a very sort of brief overview, we've had 3 corporate budget planning days, late in July, early September, and then mid-October, where we sort of incrementally built the budget, understanding where we needed to go, some of those future pressures that came into us. In our September meeting, we had Aaron Harris from the Met Office give you a full and frank overview of climate change and how that's played out more recently. I think is testament to some of the issues that he raised, showing the impact, the disproportionate impact, I'd suggest, in terms of our authority, in terms of the longer, drier summers. Hard to believe sometimes when you live through it, and the impact of wildfires, and then those warmer, wetter winters, which I think we are experiencing at the moment, right in the middle of that, and some of those sort of dual impact on us throughout the year, and as Craig has alluded to, the impact it'll have across our communities in terms of those spate conditions. We then met with after the September meeting, we met with your 6 treasurers from across your 6 local authority areas. Gave them an early indication. They do appreciate that, and it gives them an opportunity not only to quiz and to challenge us, but also to have a little bit more detail in and around our sort of assumptions of the budget and some of those pre-planning. And they really do appreciate that, because it gives them a chance at an early stage to include those within their own budget planning assumptions. And then myself, the chair, and the Section 151 officer, Sarah Mansbridge, have gone to all 6 constituent authorities. But I put on record my thanks to all of those who attended those meetings and spoke, not so much in support of the fire authority, but perhaps to provide a little bit of context and background. And we do really appreciate your value, recognising that you have 2 hats on. One is a fire authority, and obviously as a local authority member as well. But what it does mean, those 6 meetings have afforded every local authority member across all 6 constituent authorities the opportunity to quiz, to challenge, to scrutinise, and to find out more about where we are going as a service as well. So that's really, really important. It's not mandatory, it's not statutory, but I think it's really important from a transparency and an openness and a sort of candour that we try and encourage within the service as well. So that's been really helpful, and I do thank you all for your contributions in that space. I would suggest, in terms of, if I can take it all as a whole, with 6 meetings, very few questions directly on the budget, if I'm honest with you, across all 6. Some clarity required about the levy and the construction of the levy, and perhaps some future planning in terms of governance, and the possibility of a move away from a levy into a presetting model. Some clarity there. But generally, I would say the majority of the questions, probably 70-80% of them, were on operational matters, and reassurance, a lot of it, was to say, will you be closing stations? What are you looking to do? And obviously touching and pointing and directing forward into the consultation process that will take place next year. So the majority of questions were in that space, as opposed to particularly on the budget, which I way back last year, the year before, were more sort of pointed, but because I think we were probably not quite in the same space as local authorities, for very good reasons that we've articulated as well. So again, thank you very much for that, for contributions as well. But that gives you a little bit of a flavour and overview. Sarah will take you into the body of the report now in terms of the content of that.
Thank you very much, Chief. Yeah, I attended all of those meetings as well with the local authorities, and there was some really good engagement. And like the Chief said, challenge was not so much around the budget as the challenge was around the operational matters and the CRMP and how that's going to look as we move forward. But I will take through the report and I will go into some detail because I think it's really important that we do scrutinise the budget that we have in front of us and ensure that all members are happy with the information presented. So the report is presenting the medium-term financial plan, our estimate for the revenue budget for 25-26 and our capital programme. I will take you through to section 2 first, which is on page 21. And this gives you an overview here of the position in, the UK position and the Wales position. So as we know, the autumn budget came out in the end of October 2024, and that obviously then informs where we go with the Welsh Government, etc. And the Welsh Government budget was published on the 10th of December and the local government settlement on the 11th of December. So this was after we'd gone through our budget preparation, etc., planning process. So quite often we're sort of working our budget blind into what is going to come through to local authorities from Welsh Government. But the core revenue funding across Wales and across all 22 authorities was an average of 4.3% increase. That's not included in the paper in front of you because the paper had to be written in advance of that date. There were a couple of changes within there which affected the fire service in particular. So the SCAPE grant has been baselined, so that's included in the funding that goes to local authorities, and that's been included. And the SCAPE grant relates to the firefighter pensions. And that is for both the 2016 valuation and the 2020 valuation. And it also includes a grant for pay pressures, which has been received in 24-25 and has been baselined into the revenue support grant for 25-26. And that was 900,000 across 3 fire and rescue authorities, of which for 24-25 we received 320,000. So that's all been baselined as well. So everything that we're receiving is going through to local authorities, and it's important that we keep that in mind when we're setting the levy, because we're not receiving that funding direct. With regard to the 2 other fire and rescue authorities in Wales, so with regard to South Wales Fire, at this point there is no formal budget paper being published. However, I have been informally advised that they are looking at an increase of 5.7% for 25-26 for their revenue budget. Very important to note that they are not impacted, as we are and North Wales are, by the on-call retainer fee bands, because they have salary on-call. Okay, so when you look at the 5.7% and compare it to what we're asking for, you must bear that in mind, that it's not like that. And when we look at North Wales Fire, they have published their papers, which should be presented to their exec panel on the 16th of December. And they are looking at a levy increase of 7.17%, including both national insurance and on-call. So they're similarly impacted like us. Section 3 of this report sets out the current position, and I won't go into a great deal of detail there, except to say on 3.2, top of page 22, when we're going through this report, our medium-term financial plan, which was published in Feb 2024, included an indicative increase for 25-26 of 3.9%. And that would have been my starting point when I'm looking at the revenue budget for 25-26. And if you look at the table in 3.3, just to draw members' attentions once again to the fact that 3/4 of our budget is for pay, and the settlements are outside of the control of the authority with regard to that. So there's a huge proportion of our budget which is we're impacted by national pay awards, etc. If we then go to the proposal, which is in section 4, so the medium-term financial strategy was presented to Fire Authority on the 23rd of September. And at that point, it included an indicative increase for 25-26 revenue budget of 4.6% compared to the 3.9% I've just highlighted to members. But that excluded the national insurance contribution. And when we met in October at the corporate budget planning day, I did highlight to members that at that point the UK budget hadn't been announced. There were known unknowns, and we did highlight the potential for an increase in employers' national insurance contributions. And as we all know now, that has come through, and that has impacted on our budget ask for 25-26 to the tune of an additional 1.7%. So we had 4.6 in the medium-term financial strategy, and that has increased by a further 1.7% for national insurance contributions, taking us to an ask of 6.3%. The detail of that 6.3% can then be found from 4.6 onwards. And if you refer to the table on page 25, that in particular will give members a breakdown of exactly where we are with regard to our base budget 24-25, a number of adjustments that we've been able to make to our base budgets, pay and prices increases of 3%, pressures that total just over 400,000, and efficiencies that also total just over 400,000. And the assurance that I give members is that all of these budget assumptions have been rigorously reviewed. There's a little footnote to the table on page 25, and I think it's important to draw attention to that. We're asking for a revenue budget increase of 6.3%, which includes two things. It includes the national insurance increases, and it includes the on-call retainer fees, which I will explain in a little bit more detail. But if we didn't have those two items, which were outside the control of the Fire Authority, we would have been asking for a levy increase of 2.4%. Okay, so the adjustments to the base budget are all to do with budgets we've set in 24-25, where we've identified that that budget will not be required in 25-26. Effectively, it could be a saving. So, for example, on the firefighter pension scheme, where the employer's contribution rate is seen lower. Premises budgets, where our budgets for energy and NMDR are smaller than we had anticipated. So those savings we've immediately taken out of the base budget, and we have termed them as savings, not efficiencies. If I can draw members' attention then to section 4.13 and the following paragraph, 4.14 and 4.15. This explains how the on-call retainer fee balance has changed. So when we had the pay award back in which came into effect on the 1st of July, the pay award for operational staff was 4%, in line with our budget assumption. And within that pay award, there was also an element with regard to on-call retainer fee bands, whereby we would be required to introduce 5 new retainer fee bands, which are set out in the table in 4.15. Mid and West Wales Fire Authority currently offer 2 retainer fee bands, one 100% contract for over 120 hours, and one for 75% contract for under 120 hours. The National Pay Award introduces 5 bands, and you can see them there in the table. So if I just concentrate on the 120 hours for the full-time contract, for those on-call employees who are offering in excess of 120 hours, they will effectively get a 50% pay increase. So they will go from 10% of the whole-time salary up to 15% of the whole-time salary. And then you can see that the others are also listed in that table. That has given us a pay pressure of just shy of 1.5 million, and that is being included in the revenue budget and levy request for 25-26. The second thing that's hit us hard here is our national insurance contributions, employers' national insurance contributions, and this will be within your local authorities as well. So I'm sure you've heard this. And this is twofold. So the first is a decrease in the per employee threshold, which equates to £615 per employee additional employers' national insurance contribution we have to pay. And within the region of 1,300 employees, that comes to approximately 800,000 additional that we have to pay. And then with regard to the increase in the rate from 13.8% to 15%, that equates to another 450,000. So the pay pressure for us with regard to national insurance contribution is just over 1.25 million. We have to put that through the levy increase because we will not receive the funding direct from Welsh Government. And at this point in time, we are not, there is at this point in time, there is uncertainty as to how that funding will be received. And when the Resource Management Committee met in November, there was an additional recommendation that came through from the Resource Management Committee, which asked that we make representation to the Welsh Government Finance Minister to ask him to accelerate how that funding for national insurance contributions would be distributed. And further to that, for members' approval, included at Appendix C, which is on page 47, is a draft letter for members' approval with regard to this specific, particular issue. So this is the letter that is being drafted for Mr. Gyfarfod. It's highlighting that the authority does not receive funding direct from Welsh Government. It highlights the 1.254 million increase in our pay bill. And then it also goes on to say that when it was questioned at the Cyfarfod Wales conference on the 14th of November, he said that he expected that the funding would come through in the form of a supplementary allocation, potentially in May 2025. And in the local government settlement letter that's also come out, it would still appear to be that it will be a supplementary allocation and it will not be in the final settlement. The headache is for the local authorities, to be fair, because they're going to have to set a budget and not knowing how much funding they're going to receive for national insurance contribution, and not just for their own employees, but also for the social care costs that they commission, etc., and the contracts that they commission. So that's going to be very difficult, I would say. So Mid and West are raising two specific concerns. One, that we could be inadvertently excluded because we are not direct funded, and secondly, the timescale, and requesting that the national insurance contribution funding, national insurance funding is clearly identifiable for fire and rescue authorities, and that every effort is made to include the national insurance funding in the local government settlement, which is expected in February and March. Okay. So as I said previously, I'm going back now to 4.21 and 4.22, inflation and pay awards at 3%. 4.23 down to 4.27 outlines the pressures that we are facing. So this is just over the 400,000, and it addresses areas such as culture, professional support that's required, pressures within supplies and services, and within our capital funding of our capital programme. At the top of page 40, we've outlined the value for money exercise that the authority has services undertaken, which commenced back in May and is still ongoing, which has identified a number of efficiency streams. And the efficiencies that have been identified for 24-25, again, just in excess of 400,000. The detail is included there in paragraphs 4.3 down to 4.33. And in particular, I would highlight the efficiency that's been identified in our training and development as we move towards digitalising provision of training. 4.34 on page 31 then goes on to outline the medium-term financial plan and the request for the following 2 years, and that is also backed up by Appendix A, which can be found on page 43. The medium-term financial plan will be kept under very close review and will undoubtedly be subject to change, and this is because we're moving towards the CRMP. So at this point in time, particularly as we don't know the outcome of public consultation and all the work that's going on there, we're not able at this point in time to put a lot of detail into that medium-term financial plan. I move on then to the 5-year capital programme, which starts on 4.38. This has been reviewed by members and officers, and the capital programme is summarised in table 4.43. So you can see there the revised position for 24-25 is 4.026 mil, and then the estimate for 25-26 is 7.349 million, and then it is indicative from there on of 26-27 onwards, and again for the reasons with regard to the community risk management plan. So just to say as well that with regard to the capital programme, we have taken action to actually pause certain capital spend to make sure that the investments that we are doing will be aligned with our future direction. So, for example, we have paused fleet replacement programme, and in particular the purchase of fire appliances to allow appropriate research and concept trialling to be undertaken. And for property, investment will be prioritised to ensure that statutory and regulatory compliance building works continue, along with any remediation required. But major investment in projects and new projects will be subject to business cases, etc. Okay. 4.44 usable reserves. This sets out the position for our usable reserves. The general fund balance is set to be maintained at 2 million for the next 3 years, and our year-marked reserves are set to fall from 4.116 down to 2.8 mil. So they will be reduced as we use them in line with their intended purposes. The budget proposal for 25-26 assumes no contribution from reserves to support the revenue budget requirement. And just with regard to the general fund balance, 2 million represents 2.9% of our revenue budget for 24-25 and is deemed to be adequate. Section 5 of the report sets out the community risk management plan and the alignment of financial planning to ensure delivery against the improvement and wellbeing objectives that are contained within that plan. Section 7, financial and procurement implication, summarises everything that I've just told you about section 4, but in particular I would draw your attention to 7.4. So the combination order, in accordance with the combination order, the levy per constituent authority is deemed by, is determined by population. At this point in time, under the combination order, we do not expressly have to put down the levy per authority, and that was not included in this particular report because the population data set that Welsh Government used for the local government settlement was not available at the time of writing the report. Overall, we're asking for an increase in the levy of 6.3%, but for members' information, now that we have the local government settlement, I'm able to tell you that the range will be between 5.59% and 7.54%, because there have been movements within those population data sets. The risks to the budget are set out at section 8. So, for example, with pay a 1%, we've allowed 3% in 25-26. And if it was to come in at 1% more, that would give us a pay pressure of 500,000. So, with regard to the fire authority governance implications, under the Constitution, the approving of the budget and issuing the levy is a function reserved for the fire authority. And under 9.4 of this report, it sets out this has been considered by the Resource Management Committee, and they have recommended that the fire authority approve the budget as set out in this report. Section 12 sets out the consultation and communication, and I won't go into any detail over that because the Chief has covered that off, but I would just like to thank you for your engagement in the exercise through the budget planning process. It does help me and my colleagues to formulate these papers. I will now hand back to the chair for the recommendations, but I am happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Quite a comprehensive look on our report. I think we're well educated on it, and she will have answered many of our questions. Just a quick comment on the local authority meetings. Councillor John was attended in Pembroke on my behalf, but I'm absolutely concur that not too many questions on budget, but there was some challenge, and it'd be interesting to see if it's similar challenge comes today now, and if it isn't, I'll explore a couple of points later on. But yeah, difficult times and made very difficult with the budget decision, which is caused us to reflect on our ask from local authorities. But this is where we are. So open the floor up for questions, please. Councillor John.
Na i droi at y Gymraeg di felly. Ga'i gynta ddiolch I Sarah am ei gwaith trylwyo ac am mynd â ni ar hyd y daith yma o'r cychwynol yn mis Gorffennaf. Ni'n credu dechreuon y daith in July we started. Doesn't work, does it?
Again.
Yeah. Diolchgar iawn felly bod ni wedi cael y tywys yn ofalus iawn ac mewn manylder hefyd mor belled ar gyllideb hon. Chydig o gwestiynau ychwanegol. Un yn nhw yn gwestiwn gweithredol i'r swyddogion tân yn athebyg. Wrth gwrs mae dyn yn croesawu fod y ffïoedd newydd I ymladdwyr tân ar alwad wedi cynhyddu. Ond mewn unrhyw broses o newid, mae yna heriau ychwanegol yn dod, the law of unintended consequences. Ac ar sail hynny, pan ych chi'n edrych ar hyn o bryd, os gyda chi ymladdwr tân ar gael am 120 o oriau ar wythnos, mae'n derbyn o 778 o bunnoedd I fod ar alwad. Mae hwnnw'n codi 5,651. Ac yn yr un modd, fydd rhywun fydd ar hanner o'r oriau yn y dyfodol yn gallu'r ennill beth oedd rhywun ar 120. Felly, os na her fan hyn, os na risg fan hyn, fydd na nifer fawr yn penderfynu I wneud hanner o'r oriau am yr un faint o oriau. Dyna un cwestiwn. Cwestiwn gweithredol yw hwnna, fel Craig yn ymateb. I ni'n falch bod e'n digwydd. Mae'n bwysig bod nhw'n cael eu cydnabod. Ond mae yna risg fyna. Ac yr ail gwestiwn I Sarah, odi 300 o ychwanegiad yn cyflog, yn realistig, cos dyna yw'r amcan I chi di roi fewn. Gan gofio fod 100 werth 500 a hanner o filoedd I 800,000 yn ychwanegol. Pan fod heddlu, sy'n gwasanaeth golau glas arall wedi derbyn 4.75%.
We seem to be having a slight problem. Translation and
I can easily translate for you, no problem at all. Basically, retained fee bands are useful and to be welcome and recognise the retained service of their efforts and commitment, not just themselves but also to their families. But there's always the law of unintended consequences. In that regard, we will in future have those on 60 to 90 hours now earning, quite rightly so, 3,768, where currently you had to be doing 120 plus hours. So in future, you could have the same amount of monies in your pocket for half the commitment of being on call. And secondly, is 3%, this is a question for Sarah, 3% assumption for pay awards realistic, really, when you consider the other significant blue light service have just received 4.75% in the name of the police service. And every 1% pay increase is worth about 600,000 or far off, possibly more with NI contributions going up and everything else. Those 2 points.
Thank you, Councillor John, and apologies to Councillor John and to you at home that I'm picking up the translation. Maybe when we have a break, we'll try and get you those that can't access the translation services online. We'll try and get you all sorted then so we can return to our translation service, which I think is important. Roger.
Okay, I'll frame the first issue, the operational issue, Sarah will come in, and then Craig will then pick up in terms of some of the more granular detail as to where it's come from, how we intend to process it, and reflect that. You're absolutely right. There is a real risk here now that people will say, well, I'll stay on the same money, but I'll drop my hours, and our availability is impacted accordingly. Absolutely. And Craig will talk a little bit of detail how we can get and how we will manage those asks as they come through. There is also, so in simplistic terms, somebody giving 120 hours availability a week or two people giving 60 hours gets you the same point. But there's a unit cost to everything. We need to train and equip, and we can't give them half the equipment or half the training. So there is a significant impact in terms of that, and the potential of more people who come on into the service, those costs rise exponentially, and that is a challenge. Craig will talk about how other services introduced this type of banding approach and some of the risks associated with that. What I would say is we are now in the third year of looking to improve things for our RDS. I describe the service, as you'll be aware and you'll be familiar with this phrase, as an on-call service with a whole time backup, because that's what we are. So of our 56 stations, which we have contractual holdover, the other 2 volunteer stations, obviously we're not able to manage from a contractual perspective. On the 56, 43 are standalone on-call stations, and of the remaining 13, a further 9 have an on-call element within them. So we are wholly dependent on this model for the running of our statutory services. So what we've done the last couple of years, one was to introduce a recognition payment, and again, this is about speaking to our local staff. How can we improve things for them and ensuring we engage and have that dialogue going on? And that's what we brought in that recognition payment. The second thing we've done then is to recognise where people come out of their own primary employment into training with us, training, medicals, fitness tests, anything that takes them away from that primary employment, and recognise that they were, in a lot of cases, losing money because their primary employment remuneration compared to ours was significantly different. So we increased that from a time to a time and a half so that we balanced that up. And in most cases, people now certainly not losing money, which doesn't feel right. Absolutely doesn't feel right. The risk critical training they undertake on our behalf needs to be remunerated properly. And as Craig has said and alluded to previously, we've put in investments. We've put in particularly waiting stations, 13 new waiting stations, to ensure that they are now sat in the middle of their communities and able to respond. Nothing worse for them than feeling almost redundant when certain calls come in and unable to respond. So we've adapted. The investment has gone in. We've also introduced mobile phone allowance as well, recognising that that's how they communicate with each other. That's how, in a lot of cases, they keep the appliances on the run through groups and ensuring that they can I book off, can I come on? It is almost as precarious as that in certain instances as well. In terms of the MJC agreement that came in through this year, the National Joint Council, and the determination around the bandings, which Sarah's given and is referenced in the paper in some detail, that hit us sideways, if I'm honest with it. We weren't aware it was coming in. It does put a pressure, and it puts a disproportionate pressure as well in terms of your large Mets, your Londons, your Greater Manchester, your Merseyside, have no real, London have any on-call at all. So in terms of us as a remote rural service in the main, the impact on us has been disproportionate, along with certain colleagues around the country as well, your Cumbrians, Northumberlands, Lincolnshire, Devon and Somerset and the like as well. So the impact has been significant for us in terms of where we have to find money over and above what we already were making certain budget assumptions for. I'll turn to Craig now, and Craig will probably give you a little bit of how we intend to run and implement the scheme going forward. And how we will try and address some of Councillor Davis's concerns, and they are our concerns too. I think they are joint authority and service concerns of people either dropping down and providing fewer hours and hitting our availability, and how we manage that as well. I think Craig will also give a little bit of an indication of the success, I would suggest, albeit small, of our availability and the impact that the changes that you've agreed as an authority have redressed and managed that decline in availability as well. So I'll pass you over to Craig.
Okay, thanks, Chief. So you've had a bit of an outline of the on-call improvement programme, which was set up based upon the authority's investment a couple of years ago. And just to probably just top and tail some of that stuff, if you recall back at the time, we were having an evidence-based approach to the things we were trying to do. So not just listening to our staff, but looking back at previous reviews, what were outstanding in terms of recommendations, what was going on nationally as well, what was the national conversation that was taking place. and having representation into the NFCC, but also here within Wales as well. But again, being evidence-based. And we put together a paper that talked about this, but we didn't put it in play. And the reason why we didn't put it in play was we knew there was national conversations going on. We didn't know what the outcomes of those were going to be and if they were going to materialise at any point. And as the chief said, it caught us off guard that they did materialise when they did materialise as they did. But 34 fire and rescue services that put bans like this in play, with the exception of one, they all saw a decline in availability. So it's a really valid question that Councillor Davies puts forward. The fact that this is now being put on nationally, obviously here back in service, we recognised that we needed to do something very much to ensure that the £1 million of investment year on year that you've invested into the service, all of a sudden overnight didn't turn out to kind of reduce availability. It's there to sustain it. So I'll talk a bit about those managerial controls that we've now put in play. But actually, we had them in play before. We just have to make sure we provided clarity to the management staff that are working with our on-call. So currently, as per today's figures, as per the 9th of December, you recall last year, we started to see a reduction in the decline of on-call availability. And pretty much last year was about it plateauing out. So all the kind of improvements we were putting in play was there to stabilise. This year, from April onwards, we've now seen an increase in on-call availability to the tune of around about 1.6% across the whole service area. And 1.6%, as the chief said, doesn't mean much, okay? But just to give you a flavour of what it does mean from our statistician, that's one pump available 24/7 for over 100 days extra. Okay, so it's significant. It's a small percentage, but when you look at how many pumps we've got on call across the service and play those figures in, it's significant. Okay, but we can't sit on our laurels. We've got to keep pushing, got to keep that traction going. So going back to the new hours of availability, and what are we going to do to ensure that people all of a sudden don't reduce their hours to maintain the same payment? We've currently got managerial controls in place which manage what we call the DL7s, like the contracted hours with our on-call. So that's currently in play now. So if, for example, Councillor Davies was an on-call firefighter in Cymru, and you wanted to change your hours, you would need to submit a new DL7 hours of availability to the cluster manager. Now that's currently in play now. Whether we accept it or decline it has to be based upon the conversation locally. So we can't all of a sudden have a blanket approach, because what we've agreed already from a fire authority perspective and the on-call improvement programme is that blanket approaches don't work. Okay. We've also now just going out to tender for a strategic workforce management tool. What's it going to do? Well, it's going to enable us for the first time to understand that if Councillor Davies wanted to reduce his hours of availability, what the impact would be on Cymru. So would it take the pump off the run? Actually, Councillor Davies's hours duplicated and it wouldn't have an impact at all. So we're going to be using that workforce tool, subject to it being implemented in February, to better understand that some people, we probably are going to be able to enable them to do it. Some people, actually not enable them to do it just yet. It all depends on the numbers in that station, the availability in that station, the assets we have on that station. It has to be a locally led conversation supported by evidence. So what I can give you the assurance is that we're well aware there is a possibility we'll see a decline in availability. The assurance there is that we have put and strengthened the managerial controls. On the 11th of December last week, we pulled in all our management cluster staff to give them the single brief, so they're all hearing the same message. What is the message in relation to implementing these bans and what they can and can't do in terms of that conversation? So we've done that with all our staff, we've pulled them in together, and once we get that strategic workforce tool in February, it'll be even stronger. So this, 1.6% of the extra availability is quite a lot of work on behalf of a lot of officers in the service, and we don't certainly want to see that decline. I've been as succinct as I can, but hopefully that helps with the first part of the question.
Grateful for that, thank you.
Good. I'll put that second part of the question with regard to the 3% budget assumption for the increase on salaries. It's a very difficult question, and there's a lot of factors that need to play into it. Do I think it's realistic? What I can say is that it is in line with other local authorities. It's in line with North Wales Fire and South Wales Fire. And in England, they are on average putting in 2%. Okay, inflation has fallen, so there's that. But also as well, there's something in here about showing your hand to the NJC as well about how much we can afford. So for me, I'm happy with the 3%. However, if councillors want to increase the budget and put in an additional 600,000, that is within your gift.
Right, just add on top of that, it's difficult about if you're playing poker. We already said what we put in the budget. So if you're a negotiator in a union negotiator, you say, "Oh, we got that." You know, where do we go from there? You know, in simplistic terms, it doesn't quite work like that. Anyway, and it's worked out at a national level. The other factor as well, and I did pick up the FBU have started at 5%. Now, you know, that's their role as well, is to get the best for their members. I understand that. Where we will sit and where we will finish, obviously, we as part of the negotiation process going forward. But yeah, we do try and, you know, as Sarah said, learn from other, look to other organisations and try and get a feel of where they're at as well. And everyone will be slightly different, but and you're the mayoral model in London. The mayor says that's what you got. That's what you got. You know, the same in GMC. We've seen them increase, provide additional allowances for certain roles as well, because that's in the mayor's gift as well, you know, which we don't run. So yeah, but good question. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that. Good. I don't play poker and I don't like paying taxes.
Members, just before we move on, a bit of housekeeping. We note that Councillor Pregard has joined the meeting, and we also note that you may have to leave early as well. So thanks, Councillor Pregard. Members, translation is back with us now. So if you do wish to speak through the medium of Welsh, please do so. Apologies for that technical hitch. Councillor Gwynn.
Yeah, just to confirm that your meetings with the County Council, as far as I'm concerned, are very valuable. And if only it was the opportunity for people to say something, they can't complain afterwards. And it's good that there are questions that come out and direct to you, because we don't necessarily know the answers and you can update it fairly quickly. And I think the reason why a lot of the things were about operational is because the county councils themselves are now talking about operational, as in closing schools, closing libraries, and that's the thinking. Right or wrong doesn't matter. So it was natural for me to hear those kind of questions. Can I take you to, please, Sarah, to 418 and 19 on page 27, 28. The national insurance, if it comes back, it will go to the county councils, which then brings the 6.3 down.
Yeah.
Effectively, yeah.
So
in some shape or form, whatever level, it doesn't matter for the time being. But I see a possible slip here, in the sense that when the extra was paying to the councils about the pension, if you remember, it came from Cardiff direct to the county councils instead of straight direct to us. The councils kept quoting the higher price, the higher invoice that you gave them, the higher figure, and didn't bring it down because they got the money and handed it back to us. So if the money doesn't come in, it's 6.3, but if it does, you know, we do need to remind them that it's less.
Yeah, take your point on board. It is very difficult because we're based the levy on the assumption that all of this funding, pensions, the NIC, the National Insurance Contribution, as well as what they normally get as well, will all go through the local government settlement and go into the local authority. The narrative that the local authorities put into their budget papers with regard to the increase of the fire service is outside of my control, unfortunately. I hope through the presentations that we've made into local authorities, where all of the Section 151 officers have been present, will note that additional funding has gone into the local government settlement for these elements. Unfortunately, I can't control that.
No, I'm sure. Yes.
Thank you, Gwyn, Councillor Gwyn. And obviously, one of the recommendations is accepting Sarah's letter to Mr. Rhagfyr as well. So that asks for a bit more clarity as well, doesn't it?
Great.
Any further questions? A couple of things I would like to raise. One of my points, and just a couple of things which came out of our local authority meetings. The one it's 5.1 and our community risk management plan. Sarah told you how we paused some capital investment. It's a bit of an open-ended question. I apologise, but obviously there is a suggestion within that plan that will provide savings to us as a service. I just wonder. I'm quite keen to see the pace of that plan come forward. I just wonder when we will anticipate having some savings coming through from that development, really, because I think that's essential that we get some savings realised from that. But there could be some years off, really. Would there be a suggestion when we could see some savings coming forward? Obviously, consultation is going ahead, so we don't know what's going to happen, but obviously there is a certain reliance to see some savings coming forward from that. One of the other things which came out of one of the meetings was the suggestion that we should consult on our budget. We as local authorities all consult on our budget round, but we don't, and we're not required to do so. I personally don't think we should. Because it picks up resource, and sometimes we still have to provide our accounts in the manner they are, despite going out to consultation. But I did say that I would bring it. It's too late for this year, obviously, but I did say that I would bring it to the authority for some comment, really, whether we need to consult on our budget. And the other thing is, and I just think it should be mentioned today, that there was also a question surrounding the equity between authorities and the different spends in different authorities, and some authorities may have more resource down to population, etc. So I would just like to ask the chief to give the response which he gave in one of the authorities, because I think it's important that authority members should know that, really, because let's be honest, there is more spend in those authorities which have larger populations, and perhaps rural populations are penalised a bit more, but still have the service. So, Chief, if you could give that answer as well. So 3 questions from me there, please.
Yeah, if I take the last first, then in around that equity, and it's a reasonable question, to be fair. When we go into Ceredigion and Powys, and they say that the quote is all the resources go to Swansea. And my answer, my repeated answer in and around is that we manage our resources with the inherent risk, and that's something. However, there is and I'm sure the CRMP will address some of these issues going forward. There is an element of our annual funding mechanism means that you don't drive towards large scale capital projects because you only know on an annual basis what you've got from a funding perspective. So we tend to leave our capital assets where they are, our stations are where they are, where they've always been in a lot of cases. The CRMP will look to perhaps address and answer some of these questions moving forward, which have been challenging in the past. So in terms of equity, we do manage based on historic incident data, where we have our significant issues and manage and resource in and around that. Is it fair and equitable? Well, there's probably not a question for us to answer, but I think the CRMP will seek to perhaps realign some resources. That might be one of the drivers of that in the future, if that is what comes out of the consultation process. In terms of the requirement to go out to consultation on the budget, we comply with our requirements under the Combination Order 1995, and there is no direct requirement to do that. We do go out to consultation in terms of our objective settings, and we you know yourselves, it's quite challenging in terms of getting public consultation, getting views back in. They're often quite small, but we do comply with our requirements under from a strategy perspective. I'm with the chair on this to go out for another consultation process on top of what we do already would appear to be onerous, costly, and I'm not sure we'd get that engagement either. You tend to get public consultation and feedback when you're looking to change things, as you know only too well yourselves as local members as well. And in terms of the CRMP, I know we've got an item on the agenda today around CRMP, and I don't know whether the deputy who's leading that piece of work wants to pick it up then or now, just give a flavour of it now, I don't know.
The only thing I will jump in now, then, Chief. Thank you. The only thing I will add in response to the question by the chair there is that not to preempt that paper, which is item 11 on today's agenda. There are 5 stages set out in that paper, which I'll talk through later. But I presume the 6th stage of that, once we've run through the 5 stages, where we've got a clear picture of what it needs to look like. The 6th stage will be development of that financial plan, that transitional financial plan to run alongside it. So if we go back to look at that paper later and say at this time next year, we should have a clearer picture of what the future looks like. At that point, we'll be able to put pen to paper in terms of that financial plan. So,
yeah, diolch, Ewan. I'm happy with that. Anything further on this item? That takes us to the recommendations. They're on page 15. I'm not precious, but do you want to take them individually or should we take them on block? I was thinking that councillors would choose that option. So recommendations 1 to 5. I'm not going to read them out. They're on page 15 of your document pack. And we agree the following: 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm looking for a proposer. Thank you. And a seconder. Everywhere, Councillor Emblin. Members, I've had a proposer and a seconder. Can you please indicate if you're in favour of those 5 recommendations? Good. To the contrary? If you could take your hands down online now, that would be good. On to the contrary? And any abstentions? There we are. Those recommendations are carried. There's clearly a bit of a problem online. Councillor Kane has noted if you do access the translation service on your phones, can you please remember to go onto mute afterwards, because there's obviously some feedback coming forward or conversations being heard. So that would be good if you could do that. Thank you. That concludes item 5. I'm very aware of the time, members, and the need for a break. I'm going to take one further item now so that we can get some way through the agenda before we take a break. So we'll do agenda item 6. It's the 2024-25 mid-year Treasury Management Report. It's with Sarah again, and I'll leave Sarah explain why this report is before us. Agenda item 6.
Thank you very much, Chair. So this report is in front of members for decision. You won't have seen this report before as a member of the Fire Authority, but potentially you will have seen it in your own constituent authority. So this has arisen out of a requirement in the CIPRA Codes of Practice for Prudential Code and Treasury Management Code. And we adhere to those when we do our Treasury Management Strategy Statement, which was approved by Fire Authority on the 12th of earlier this year. And within that Treasury Management Strategy Statement, there's a requirement regarding Treasury reports that Fire Authority should receive. So there's one that is the Treasury Management Strategy Statement. There's the second one, which is the report that's in front of you today, which is the mid-year Treasury Management Report. And then there will be a third report, which will be the annual Treasury Report. Now, up until this juncture, we have always reported our Treasury Management activity through existing reports. So it's been within our actual report, it's been within our quarterly updates on the budget. But there is a requirement for a more in-depth report, and in particular to review prudential indicators and treasury management indicators, and to ensure that the authority is complying with them throughout the year. So if I take members to section 3, our strategy, Treasury strategy, covers the period 1st of April 24 to 31st of March 25. As you'll see in section 3.3 downwards, there's the economic update. And in particular in there, I would highlight that inflation has fallen. It fell to 1.7% in September, has now increased in October back up to 2.3%. And effectively, when the Bank of England then were reviewing the base rate, the interest rate, there was a cut to 5% back in September 2024. What you'll also see in 3.6 and 3.7 are prospects for interest rates. And you'll see that if you compare the two tables there, that we are now expecting interest rates to fall at a lower rate, at a lower pace than was originally envisaged. And that impacts us with regard to affordability of our capital programme, etc. The next section outlines the borrowing. So in particular for capital expenditure, we use long-term borrowing. And the table at the top of page 55 there outlines our total borrowing at the 31st of March, at the end of the last financial year, at 34.8 million. And the balance now is just over 30 million. So effectively, we've repaid 4.8 million. And what's happening now is as our borrowing is becoming due for replacement, or we need to for refinancing, or we need to raise additional loans, because the interest rate is staying higher for longer, we're being advised by our Treasury Management advisors to look at short-term borrowing until the interest rate has fallen further. Table 3 in 3.11 sets out the number of loans we've got. So you can see there we've got 23 loans with PWLB, and at the moment I've got an average of 3.264%. So if you compare that to the current interest rates that are available, then obviously our portfolio is actually quite cheap at this point in time. So we're trying to avoid increasing that rate as far as possible, although you'll see from the tables back in 3.7, it will be at least a year before rates come down anywhere near those levels. And in fact, they won't be coming down to that level. They reckon it will be about 4%. Table at the page of page 56 shows you the repayment profile for our PWLB loans and our temporary local authority borrowing. And you can see there that what we're trying to do is to have a more or less even repayment profile so that we don't become a forced borrower effectively. So, and then in section 3.13, it shows you the investments that we've got. As you know, we're not particularly cash rich. I earlier told you what our reserves are, etc. So our balance at 31st of March at the end of the last financial year for investments was just over 1.2 million. And as at 31st of October, it stood at 2.5 million. Right, okay, so 3.17 credential indicators. So these are the indicators that are designed to ensure that any borrowing or long-term liabilities entered into are for capital purposes, and they are affordable, sustainable and prudent. So we should only be borrowing for capital purposes. We should never borrow for revenue purposes. And in 3.18, this shows you our capital financing requirement. And I think effectively, this is our underlying need to borrow. So this is the maximum that we should be borrowing at any point in time. So the estimate for 24-25 is a capital financing requirement of 46 million. Now that would be based on if we were to deliver absolutely everything in our capital programme and we were to borrow against all of that, then we would have loans to the value of 46 million. We are nowhere near that at the moment. Two reasons: because we're internally borrowed as far as possible, so we use our working capital, etc. And secondly, because we haven't delivered the full capital programme. So that would be the same in your own authorities as well. And to ensure that we don't overborrow, we set an authorised limit and an operational boundary. And those are currently set at 56 million and currently set at 56 million and 51 million respectively. And as I've said, neither of those boundaries have been breached, so we're happy with that one. We then asked to set a liability benchmark, very similarly as well. And that graph on page 59, the thick black line is our actual forecast borrowing out to 2028. And you see there that it's well below our capital financing requirement. So again, an indication that we are only borrowing for capital purposes. Table in 3.24 sets out the structure of maturity, the maturity structure of our borrowing. And again, this is to ensure that we don't become a forced borrower, that we don't have to borrow anything everything at a particular point in time. So we set these bands to make sure that there is a profile that is sort of evenly spaced. And then 3.26 is the statutory duty of the authority to determine and keep under review the affordable borrowing limits. And we are complying with those, and also to ensure that we are complying with our treasury management practices. And I can give members assurance that we are required and that we are complying with those as well. And finally, just to say, under the Constitution, it is for the Fire Authority has responsibility for agreeing and adopting strategy and to receive this mid-year term report. I'm happy to take any questions on that, and I know I've counted through. So if anybody wants any clarity on it, then please ask.
Thank you, Sarah. It's very comprehensive as usual, and an important document, a very important financial document which has come before us. Members, any comments or questions? No? Oh, yes, Councillor King.
Thank you. Thank you for the comprehensive report. And I mean, you did actually answer the question that I had, but I just wanted to highlight, the cost generally of shorter term borrowing is higher than longer term borrowing, but you've covered that off as long as interest rates actually will reduce in the future. So that does need a close eye on it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Kim.
Thank you.
Anything further? If not, then I'm looking for a proposal for the recommendation that the Fire Authority approve the 24-25 mid-year Treasury Management Report. Yes, Councillor Gordon, Councillor Emlyn, those indicate in favour, please. Thank you. To the contrary? Okay, all hands down to the contrary. And any abstentions? Thank you all. That recommendation is carried at agenda item 6. Members, good to my word, 11:30. We're going to have a short break. I am going to say 5 minutes. We've got quite an agenda to get through before lunch. So a quick 5-minute break, if that's okay with everybody. So I'm looking to return at 11:35. So that gives you 7 minutes. 11:35. Thank you. Everybody okay? Welcome back, everybody. We're still going through our agenda of today. Members reminding everybody that we do have translation and we are up and running. So welcome back. We now move on to agenda item 7, which is disciplinary procedures for brigade manager up to and including deputy chief fire officer. Pages 63 to 100 in your pack, and assistant chief Midrian, director of resources, is going to take us through those.
Thank you, Chair. Right, I've taken this to item 7 as the chairman did to pages 63 to 100 of your pack. And this particular document was last approved by Fire Authority in December 2023. The decision paper, members, but I'll capture the main points for your awareness. So page 67 of your bundle, then from section 1 to section 3 of the covering report, what we have here is a specific level of disciplinary procedure document for employees deemed as brigade managers up to and including deputy chief fire officer. And that's aligned to the Fire Authority's constitution of the Fire Authority, the scheme of conditions of service, as agreed by the NGSC for brigade managers of fire and rescue services. And any amendments that need to be done to this document do need to be through the Fire Authority approval route. So for clarity, brigade managers, they're deemed as the deputy chief fire officer, a deputy chief officer, assistant chief fire officer, and assistant chief officer. And that's captured in Appendix 1, but for the purposes of your information, that would be the deputy chief fire officer of this organisation, the assistant chief fire officer, and assistant chief officer. Coming down to section 4, the covering report proposal. As a service, we do update our procedures when required, and if there's an external need, we need to influence that. And this report reflects some of the amendments that we are proposing to the content captured at 4.2. There are only 3 areas I'm going to cover off with you, members. So at section 3, so page 75 of your pack, if you want to have a closer look of Appendix 1, we've included an additional paragraph relating to highlighting the welfare channels which are available to a brigade manager who may be subject to an investigation. And under the procedure, you reflect that, make sure that if anybody is involved in this, that we can signpost them to the welfare channels and the support channels available to them. At section 5, that's at the bottom of page 8 and into page 9 of Appendix 1, so page 59 of your pack. Clarification, we've added in there that any reports will automatically be provided to the brigade manager and the investigation, removing the requirement for them to request further information. So that's been amended as well. And lastly, members, in the middle of page 10 or page 80 of your pack, then there is a rewording of the disciplinary actions. There's a list there, bullet point list, and the introduction of a final written warning. And that's in line with our own other service disciplinary procedures as well. So these amendments, as we've captured there, they've been based on discussions with the trade unions and feedback from officers as well. And that's part of the communication and employee engagement that we do have as standard practice for certain matters. So, Chair, those are the only amendments for members' approval. And that brings me to the end of the report. I haven't to take any questions. I've also got the head of HR, Mark Wild, sitting alongside me as well, if there's any specific questions or detail.
Chair. Members, Edwin's taken you through any changes, but obviously he'll take any questions on any part of the report if you feel fit. Councillor David.
Just one question, actually. On page 80, when you got verbal warning, written warning, final written warning, and you got a number of months time period after that, what's that relate to? What's that mean?
That's how long the award is flagged for. It's how long it's valid for.
Then it goes off the file.
And then it goes off the file.
Okay, thanks you, David. Councillor Gordon.
The only one I've got a query on is page 75, top paragraph, where it says halfway through, with a view of minimising the potential stress and anxiety levels of the individuals. I feel that there's two standards here. You've got firefighters and junior officers. Like, for example, a firefighter a couple of months back got suspended for 6 months, not knowing whether he was going to be in a job or out of a job. He's actually been sacked. No names mentioned. He's actually been sacked now. The stress he went through over those 6 months was absolutely ridiculous. The boy is actually suicidal. And that shouldn't happen. And I don't think there should be two standards. It should be across the board. If that this policy should be across the board for firefighters, junior officers, and senior officers, because disciplines have been on for months and months and months. I've experienced it when I was in a job. Boys were getting suspended, and it was ridiculous what stress they go through.
Okay, that brings another document into place, but yeah.
Okay, if I can just outline the broad procedure, and I'll bring in a Dimitri or Mark in terms of some of the finer detail. Recognising that any period of investigation, whether not everybody who's suspended out of the organisation can go through investigation and remain in work, depending on what it is. We take a case-by-case view on that. Welfare is provided. If somebody is suspended, they have a welfare officer assigned to them for that very reason, to support them through that process, recognising that it's stressful, recognising that certain investigations do take a long time, because you may have to interview dozens of people in certain instances in order to comply with the investigation process. Then triangulate and coordinate the information, then obviously set out the sort of statutory process, or the internal processes, I should say, in terms of setting up a disciplinary panel, and, allowing proper time and opportunity for individuals to, mount and present their defence as well. So we try and expedite these things as quickly as possible. What we have introduced in the last couple of years, and I'm going back certainly when you were in the service, Councillor Walker, it would have been already busy officers given an investigation to do on top of everything else. But we now have a professional standards, a resolution officer who, and that's his primary role, his only role, is to manage in that space. So we have invested in that space, recognising we want to shorten the period in terms of anybody that's an investigation, recognising that that's the appropriate thing to do. And in terms of the welfare process, that's across the board. It's not only applicable to, in this paper, in terms of officers up to deputy, including deputy chief fire officer, but across staff across the board as well. So those are opportunities unavailable, plus support from an occupational health perspective, normal processes they have for support as well would be in place across the board, every member of staff. So there's no delineation between level within the organisation at all. We recognise that welfare is important across the board. So those things are in place. I don't know if Mark or Madrid want to add anything in terms of that.
Well, just to mention, just to build on that, Chief, if I may then. So when staff receive the letters, it's all signposted within there in terms of the welfare provisions available to us, whether it's colleague support, whether it's their line manager, whether it should be trade union support network, occupational health. We have a 24-hour 365 telephone counselling service as well, provided through a provider called Viva, which we've had really good feedback upon. So all this has been signposted to the individuals. And we do encourage individuals to every opportunity to seek that support. Is there anything else, Mark, that you know?
Just that the paragraph that's been included isn't unique to this procedure, this in front of members today. It's actually part of all the disciplinary procedures. And when it was reviewed, it was noted that it was absent in this one. So it's been lifted out of the disciplinary procedure that applies to all staff. So the support and welfare is very important.
So I'd suggest this paper is now bringing officers that are included in this policy in line with what is already provided for the members of staff of the organisation. as opposed to any sort of differentiation.
Another question what I would be is, are there any officers on a written warning regarding this policy at this present time? In this,
If I may just mention, I mean, I think I'd have to say that this policy this procedure refers to a very small cohort of individuals, actually 3 individuals in this room, and I think we need to be mindful of any discussions about any specifics on that.
Well, I'm just asking the question, are there any officers that ask for names or anything like that? Just any officers?
No, there isn't.
There isn't.
Okay, have we explored all comments and questions? Just checking online. Anybody online? No. If not, we'll go to the recommendation. Item 7 on your agenda. Members are asked to approve the disciplinary procedures for brigade manager level up to and including deputy chief officer. Everybody in support of that recommendation? Accepted? To the contrary? You're against, Councillor Gordon. Just if you could take your hands down online. Right, to the contrary, Councillor Gordon, if you can indicate again. Yeah. And any abstention. Members, the recommendation accepted as a majority. Thank you. Item 8 in the agenda, amendments to the Constitution. Quite a large document, but David Daycock, our monitoring officer, will take us through the changes. It's 101 to 350 in your pack. Dave.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, apologies for the incorporation of the entire Constitution into the report. I'm reliably informed it was impossible to actually pull out the relevant parts that have been changed. So unfortunately, we erred on the side of completedness and give you the whole Constitution, which may help you get to sleep if you've sleepless nights over Christmas. But certainly apologies for that, and I'm sure in the fullness of time the IT department will be able to work out how we can extract relevant extracts from the Constitution for you if we need to do this in future meetings. Very briefly, as you can see there, it's setting out really changes to the Constitution. It's good practice to keep the Constitution under review. We've had numerous revisions of it, although the bare bones of it was set way back in 1996, and they tend to be standard documents. Your constituent authorities will have very, very similar provisions in the Constitution itself. The key changes and provisions that are set out probably are set out on page 106 of the document itself there. Certain changes are being made. For example, changes to plant and property values going up from 5,000 to 10,000 generally, reflecting inflation on issues of that nature. Issues concerning debit and credit card incomes and requiring notification to be put through the Finance Department to assist in facilitating that. And then terminological changes as well, I think have been set out on 414 there, gender neutral phraseology and things of that nature, just to bring the Constitution really up to modern parlance. Slight change there for the number of members to quorum on the Democratic Services Forum. We specifically stated that will be 4. And then lastly, you've heard a little bit more about this on the next item from Midrian. We've got new procurement regulations and acts in force, in particular the new Procurement Act itself 2023, which I think is coming into force in February now in 2025. There will be implications for the management of that, and Midrian will deal with it in more depth, but it straddles two things. It straddles contract standing orders, but it's also part of the official Constitution itself. So what we try to do is to bring the Constitution up to date, to make it a living, effective document. I think it's been through the Democratic Services Forum, Chair. Members obviously comfortable with it. Ultimately, some of it, you just got to like it and lump it. That's what the law of the land says, and we need to change the Constitution to reflect that. Others are a little bit more personal to the authority itself. But in essence, Chair, the changes are set out in the document, replicated in the full Constitution that is attached there. And really, it's for members to agree. If you've got any questions, I'll try to answer them as best I can. But certainly, it's just a good housekeeping, really, on behalf of the Fire Authority.
Good. Members, any comments? You haven't read it, have you?
Got through the first 3 pages.
I quite like reading constitutions, actually, and not really in relation to the changes, but I would like to, I would just like to ask the clerk.
Thank you, Chair.
In relation, yeah, but it's nothing in relation today, and I was just curious, really, in relation to the chair of the authority. There's no reference to the sharing of that chair through the local authorities. We use that system, and I'm not looking to change that at all in any way, but it isn't actually detailed in the Constitution.
I thought it was.
Okay. I haven't read it.
I haven't read it. The authorities. There's a list of authorities in order.
I was just looking at the section on the chair. I highlighted it, and I was
somewhere.
It doesn't say, but if it is in there, that's great. But
it is there.
What we can do, Chair, is refer to it as a well-known constitutional convention, so we can combine with it. But if we push comes to shove,
I'm not saying it's wrong at all, but I was
the High Court and sue us.
I'm just looking for some clarity.
But I think it makes sense to replicate the actual constituent authorities themselves, and it shares it around. And I think in previous years it was just a 1-year tenure. Now I think we do it a 2-year tenure, which I'm sure it gives you a little bit more chance to bed in. And,
no, I'm not looking to change anything. I was just looking to make sure that it was in there, really. So
if you want, Chair, we'll bring that to the Democratic Services Forum next time.
I'll get past page 205 when I continue to read it.
It is actually on section 5.1.3. I've obviously retained this all by memory.
That is showing off. That is showing off. Thank you, Chief. Members, the document is before us, and apologies for raising that. Item 8 on your agenda, to agree and adopt the amendments to the authority's constitution as set out in Appendix 1 of the report. Members, can I have a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Emlyn, Councillor Gordon. Can you all indicate in favour, please? Good. To the contrary? And any abstentions? Thank you. Those changes are agreed in that recommendation at item 8. Thank you, Dave. Changes to contract standing orders, pages 351 to 384 in your back. It's item 9 on your agenda. Again, with the Assistant Chief, Midrian, to take us through this, please.
Dr. Thank you. And yes, back with myself for this particular item. Item 9, so members, changes 351 as the Chair's mentioned just now. Changes to contract standing orders, and this further decision paper for yourself for today. So some small changes which we're going to talk through as part of this report. And effectively, contract standing orders is the framework that this service applies in all its procurement decisions. Is very pivotal for the authority and for the service. Based upon local government legislation as captured there, and it intends to promote good procurement practice and public accountability, as well as legal compliance, which is absolutely crucial. Basically, it's the best practice document procurement process for the authority to follow. So as you see in page 355, section 2 of the covering report, we do mention there about the 3 wheels working together collaboratively on matters of procurement. We've done quite a bit in the past on matters of procurement across Wales. That's including purchase of appliances, fire emergency kit, operational kit, and even more recently, the corporate way that firefighters are embarking on. So with the new 2023 Procurement Act that came into being and the new procurement regulations that came into being in 2024, that's due to come into force in February 2025. So it's been necessary to update the contract standing orders as a result, as part of our duty under Article 22 of the Constitution of the Fire Authority. That's captured in section 3 of the covering report. So moving on, new procurement legislation that's coming in, as is mentioned, they're aimed at improving social and economic aspects within the communities this authority serves and creating opportunities for local SMEs and includes increased transparency. So local suppliers which we're reaching out to will be able to see what they need to do to improve their bids for procurement contracts. Working with local SMEs members is something the service is doing very well and will continue to do so. And the legislation also encourages greater collaboration, something we're really good at, with suppliers from the pre-tender engagement, the pre-tender discussions, right through to when they've had the contract and taken them through that process. And you have a mutual and receptive benefit that derives from that. The service, we do have in place a highly respected procurement department members, and I'd add that we're probably very much at the forefront of best practice procurement within the public sector in Wales. I know that Helen Rees, who's sitting alongside me here, our head of procurement and contracting, she's been a key figure in shaping the application of the new procurement regulations for the public sector in Wales. So really in a good place to have that expert advice. On Appendix 1 members, there is a long list of the changes, and I'm not going to go through them, but they've been made to the contract standing orders as part of the audit trail to show what's been amended. And at Appendix 2 is the updated contract standing orders in its full and final version. Probably just a point of note then, probably the most significant aspect we've captured in the report is arising from the new regulations. It's likely to be the additional workload it'll place on our procurement team. We have a team of 4 individuals serving the whole authority. And we know that with the embedding of the new legislation next year, there's going to be a heavily increased impact on the administration of that. And I think there's examples there at section 7.1 where when we talk about contract notices, which we're obliged to do, I think we're talking around 2 currently for the current contracts, and potentially of the new legislation, they're looking for more transparency, and that's likely to go up to 14 notices captured from the pre-engagement stage right through to contract award and more. So again, that's something we're going to keep a very close eye on and try and make it as efficient as possible, and obviously take advice from our head of procurement and contracting on anything we need to embed this to work well. So, Chair, that's probably the end of the update I've got. Very straightforward. Happy to take any questions, and again, have Helen be supporting me here today on any specific really may wish to. So, thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. Members, any comments on this? No. Are we happy that we? What's the?
To agree.
We have to agree. I'm looking for it now. I've lost it online now. What item are we on?
Item 9.
Oh, apologies. I turned the page. There we go. Members, we note the report. The party notes the contents of the report and approve the changes to the contract standing orders from the regulation implementation date. Members, do I have a proposal for this document? Thank you, Councillor Emily, Councillor Gwynn. All in favour? Thank you. To the contrary? Nothing, and abstentions. Thank you, Midian. The report has been noted. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. May I just extend my thank you to Helen as well for all the work she's done on the contracts on the audits.
Yeah, thank you, Helen. Item 10, it's the Audit Wales Governors of Fire and Rescue Authority's response. Members, we've had discussions on this in here and in Democratic Services and other committees. We'll go to Dave for some comment, but also to John, Chair of Democratic Services, who's led on this as well, please. So, Dave, anything to say?
Just very briefly, Chair, members fully familiar with this. It's obviously in response to the audit, Wales audit investigation and report into the 3 fire authorities within Wales. It came back for information to the previous fire authority, and it was felt that there was a need to respond to it to make the position of West Wales Fire clear to the document itself, and that then was deputised, if you like, or delegated to the Democratic Services Forum. It went to the Democratic Services Forum, and that in turn in effect put together a subgroup of members to look at this in a bit more depth and to craft a letter that was done under the leadership, in my understanding, of Councillor Davis and is attached at Appendix 1 there. I'll come on to Councillor Davis in a minute just to talk you through, but some of the key points really that it acknowledges that the good practice of Vision West Wales in training and development, and that was highlighted in the report from Audit Wales, but also that we felt that within the Fire Authority itself, there is considerable effort put in to training, development and looking at the needs of members, and that not in least is evidenced by enhanced annual appraisal processes and also information sheets being sent out or intended to be sent out to local authorities to highlight the role and the duties of Fire Authority members. I think a very significant point is that the last point on page 391 there is that it was a bit of a one-size-fits-all, a bit of a blunderbuss approach by Audit Wales, criticisms of other fire authorities unfairly being ladled against individual fire authorities, or not being individualised rather, and a tri-service approach is probably not the right approach. It should have been specific to each fire authority in Wales, and we generally felt that that would show Mid and West Wales in a much better light than probably our other fire authorities there. And again, an interesting point made over the page there about we don't see that it's sensible to cut down on membership because it reflects the wide nature, geographical and other nature of the fire authority itself, but stands in stark contrast with the intention of the Assembly seeking to increase their membership, because that's supposed to be a wonderful thing for the Assembly, but reduction in membership is equally a wonderful thing in the view of Audit Wales for fire authorities, and that doesn't really stack up. I think that's a very well-made point in the document itself then. So there is the letter there. I'll ask Councillor Davis to come in because I think he was instrumental in driving this forward, but I think it stands as a useful response to Audit Wales and will go out then in the name of the Chair of the Fire Authority. So Councillor Davis, if you'd like to add anything.
Just very briefly, I think you captured it very well, but it was incumbent upon us to respond. I think to have remained silent would have been an air of acceptance. So there were certain elements that needed to be challenged. Some of those elements referred back to the 2018 review, which was never taken forward. And in that regard, it was in relation to numbers of members on Fire Authority and also the status of some of those members, as in backbenchers, and questioning the ability of backbenchers. So we've pushed back significantly on that because there's no doubt that there are thoughts gathering that we may want to change those elements as far as the future governance of fire authorities in Wales. And the DSF delegated it to a group of members. The group of members are constituted by virtue of chairs, leaders of those political groups. So therefore it gave you political buy-in and along with chairs of the main committee. So it gave us a cross-section of buy-in. And by virtue of that, you have today's draft letter. And can I take this opportunity to Aled and John Harrod for crafting this, capturing the thoughts and crafting this response. And I'm more than happy to move to that effect that we now send it on its way. Chair.
Thank you. It's been proposed. I will give an opportunity for anybody to comment on it, or would like to see some additions or something taken out. Members, any comments? Okay, Councillor John was proposed. Looking for a second there. Thank you. The priority, the members approve the response on behalf of the Fire Authority. All in favour? The contrary? Thank you. That letter will be sent and I'll gladly sign it. Thank you. Item 11 on the agenda. We've already had a little bit of a discussion on this. Is the Community Risk Management Plan 2040 Public Consultation Overview. And this is with the Deputy Chief Fire Officer, Llun, who's going to take us through this, please. Thank you, Llun.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so the Community Risk Management Plan, the overview really of what the public consultation or what the next 12 months will look like for us as the authority in the service. So this paper outlines those next steps for the Community Risk Management Plan. And if you recall, we agreed at last meeting to go out to public consultation But we also agreed that we would come back to yourselves members with an outline of what that looked like. So here we are today with that. And one of the objectives highlighted in the CRMP is to engage and consult with the communities to understand their expectations of us as a service going forward. So during this period, the CRMP team have engaged with a consultation specialist, and that was on the back of the initial engagement was with the Consultation Institute as a body, but they soon after we made contact, they ceased to trade as an organisation. So we progressed with the consultation specialist, who's met, as I said, with the CRMP team and service. And that individual recommended a 5-stage approach, which is highlighted within the document, which I'll come on to in a moment. And that's in line with best practice out there in terms of public consultation on matters. A key point for us as well is to ensure that we adhere with the gunning principles. They're captured within the document too. So there are 4 bullet points there which set out the document around the gunning principles. One of the first one on there is that proposals are still at formative stage, and I referred to that at the last update on the paper, the last meeting. But for the crux of this paper, I'll take you to page 400 of the pack, really, and it's all set out there in the diagram at the top, which sets out the 5 stages, and then paragraphs 3.4 through to 3.8, which set out each stage. So the first stage is about defining our issues, and we're in this stage now, December of this year through to February next year. And you see the timeline there takes us through the whole of 2025. So at this meeting next year, we'd like to be in a position to update members further. The first stage there, defining our issues, defining the challenges, defining the issues. And then we go on to the scoping stage in March, where we understand what is up for influence and within the scope of public consultation, and what sits within the scope of chief officer responsibilities or fire authority responsibilities themselves. We'll take that forward then to what's called a balanced room, where we'll have a group of diverse stakeholders, varying perspectives and interest from across the area that we serve, to have that open dialogue within those balanced rooms and come up with a long list of implementation options following that stage, which will be run through from spring and summer of next year. Then there's a shortlisting period where that long list will be brought down to a shorter list where the hurdles and red line criteria are put in. And an example of something like a red line or a hurdle, a red line would maybe be budget, that there isn't an infinite pot of budget to be able to deliver anything. So the options at the early stage may be a long list and really open, and then that would be narrowed down through application of hurdles and red line criteria, as I say, during stage 4, which will leave us with a shorter list of viable options to go to public consultation on at the end of next calendar year. I'll also draw attention, just to finish, on section 6 of the paper there in terms of the Wellbeing Goals of Future Generations Act 2015. And the work of the CRMP aligns very, very closely to the requirements of the Act here in terms of long-term prevention, integration, collaboration, working with diverse stakeholders, involvement of the public, and so forth. So that's a key part of our approach going forward. The reports for information, just on the back of the agreement at last Fire Authority meeting, just to set out what the next 12 months looks like. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, interesting document.
I just refer to a very small example of an important reflection of trying to engage. So on Saturday afternoon, wheeling my twin grandchildren through town, and there's a fire engine in Guildhall Square with fire service staff in attendance. I'm just literally talking, communicating with the general public. And the town on Saturday was absolutely marvellous. I haven't seen some visit for ages. A lot of people around, there's some good positive engagement, all ages, children, young adults, older people. Only a small reflection, but I think it's important to see that for people to appreciate. But this isn't something someone else, this is in your community. It's important that we appreciate what you do. And that you have feedback as well from individuals, whatever their age. That was great to see. Really sort of very encouraging to see stuff like that. They were there Friday as well. How they? Okay. Good.
Struggling on that, Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Chair. So always a challenge to get the consultation engagement correct. The crux of this as to whether it will work is whether or not the balanced rooms are effective and having enough of a wide engagement with those. Do we have an idea of who will be in those?
We haven't determined lists of individuals as yet. We started discussing approaches to balanced room because that can vary in itself, whether it's roundtable options and so forth. We have engaged with Awdurdod Health Board. They've been doing a lot of public consultation over the last few years in terms of their approach and what the consultant offers in that regard. I can see Richie Felton on screen there, Chair. So I don't know if Richie wants to add anything to that for the Chair.
Yep. Fire away, Rich.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Yeah, we are undertaking stakeholder analysis currently. We have already got a stakeholder analysis list, which has been ongoing through the public consultations for so many years. So we're updating it, and with help of Kathy, who is the consultant we're dealing with, she's going to undertake a balanced room appraisal before we undertake it to make sure that it aligns with who we feel is our key stakeholders within that. So that work is ongoing.
Thank you, Rich. Happy with that, Councillor Kim?
Yes, thank you. It's just
Thank
that
you.
it will affect everything.
Good, thank you. Councillor Linden was indicating, but he seems to have disappeared.
Yeah, no, he is still.
He's indicating. Councillor Linden.
Yeah, great. Fine,
Councillor-
thanks, Chair. I think it's important that we get a good public consultation and that we get real people involved in those rooms as well. Not just people from some organisations and so on. So I think a lot of care, and I'm sure it will, but we need to make sure that actually happens.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Linden, for the report. Now, Councillor Gwynn.
Yeah, when we get to stage 4, the shortlistings, having done 1, 2, and 3, who is actually doing that? Who is bringing it to the shortlist? Because I am aware of, and it was mentioned as possibly an example of how not to do it, is that you can make the consultation list to give you the answer that you want. So is there scrutiny at that moment?
There's a couple of key points here, and I'll bring Richard back in a moment. And it's something of particular relevance to yourselves as the ultimate decision makers in these matters, and the advice coming from the consultant in terms of at what stage do yourselves as members step back from the forming of the options so that you can reflect on all the options when it comes to decision making. So that will be a key part for us. I think the plus for us in terms of engaging with the likes of Awdurdod Health Board, Scottish FRS, so what North Wales FRS did last year, is that we can learn from the approach that they've taken, whether that's good, bad, or indifferent. So there's certainly that going on as well. The only other thing I'd like to add in terms of that last point around the community engagement is that we have recently put an advert out as well for community ambassadors to come and engage with us on the CRMP programme. So, and that's gone out far and wide. So whoever comes back with a hand up of interest to join that programme, we welcome them in from the public floor to be able to sit on the engagement objective of the programme. But again, through the chair, I'll ask if Richie can wants to add anything to Councillor Wigley's question.
Yeah, sure. So the shortlisting is really dictated by the desirable outcome. So in the scoping phase, the important bit to understand is the balanced rooms may happen 5 or 6 times over the next 5 to 6 years. So once the issues paper has been done, an example of that, as we've mentioned whole vow already, is their sort of issues and challenge paper was written in 2016, I believe. It is continually updated. It's a live document, as you were, but that's referred to maybe 4 or 5 times within balanced rooms. So we'll take an objective from CRMP, for instance, let's use number 4. So how we implement changes, the way we respond to incidents within CRIMP is obviously a set of desirable criteria where we know what success looks like if we can achieve this. So that is put on the back of the outcome. So that's what we're looking for, that's what we're striving for, and we're trying to find out the best way to do that in a collaborative, consultative way. And then obviously you've got the overlay then of the services red line criteria, as the deputy said. You know, there'll be decisions being made continually as we assess the environment around what is something which can be achieved and what can't. And then you've got some hurdle criteria, whereas something would be considered appropriate if it was able to overcome certain challenges. So that's all fed together to come up with probably 3 to 5 options that will ultimately then go forward to public consultation. And that's the bit then where we've been doing for many years. We throw that far and wide, and we get as much out, input from the public and other areas, and throughout this process, I think it's important to add is there's many different steps and balances to make sure that we're continually trying to find the unknown. If there is a stakeholder out there, or if there's something we've missed throughout the process, there are catches within this process which will allow us to make sure that we're cognizant of that and we include that within the process. Ultimately, all the options that come out of the balance room will be put together in an output paper, so it will be clear and transparent. So if an option doesn't go forward to public consultation, it'll be clear why that option has not made its way through to public consultation, and that will be set out within that output paper.
Good. So it won't be coming back to us until after 5, or a subcommittee or a scrutiny committee.
So I think it comes back again. I looked at it. I think it comes back before 5.
It does, does it? That's what I wanted to know.
It's the stages of 2 and 3 which will be involved in.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody content? Everybody happy where this paper is leading us? Okay, we'll go to the recommendation. But the fire authority note the contents of the report. That's at item 11 on your agenda. Proposer on a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Emlyn, Councillor Gwynn. All in favour? Good. Those to the contrary? Any abstentions? Thank you all. The report, we're happy with the journey you went. Let's hope we have some really good outcomes. Well, we will get some really good outcomes. Item 12 on your agenda is the Standards Committee annual report. I believe we have Mr. Martin Beale with us, who's our independent chair. Yeah, Dave's going to give us a lead into this, and then we'll come over to you, Martin. But welcome to our meeting today.
Sorry, Martin Beale is not in the meeting.
Okay, it's all on you then, Dave.
We are, nothing exciting change at the last minute, but yeah, apologies, members. We did think that Mr. B would be with us, but unfortunately he cannot make it. But I'll try to present this as best I can in his stead. You're no doubt familiar that via your own standards committees and your own constituent authorities, that there is a requirement that they feed back to your governing body on the work of the standards committee in a municipal year, and that's no different really for ourselves. Our standards committee is a standalone standards committee, and if I take the liberty of saying so, I think we're very lucky in the quality of the members of the standards committee itself, and they've done quite considerable work throughout the year in order to ensure the high standards of behaviour within the fire authority itself. And really the work of the standards committee is set out in Appendix 1 to your report there, to give you a flavour really of what's been going on, and to make you aware of the work of the standards committee itself. If I can actually take you to the report itself, the introduction from the chair, and then the membership set out there. As you can see, there are members of the authority here. I think the only one that's left now is yourself, Councillor Roderick, the very fetching photograph there of you, but there's also independent members as well, including the chair, Martin Veal, who's also a justice of the peace as well, which I then again thinks replicates. That's a lovely photograph of myself at the back as well. Had my head especially for that one. Anyway, Chair, moving on. The first page of the report, page 414, there sets out the work of the committee, and that really is self-evident, primarily to make sure that the code of conduct is complied with and that members are aware of the requirements of the code of conduct itself. But also two specific issues really to mention there. One is to deal with any matters referred back to the Standards Committee by the Public Services Ombudsman for Wales. I'll come on to that in a minute. We had the first referral back in many, many years, if not ever, to the Standards Committee in the municipal year in question. But also something that we've done ourselves as a fire authority is to add to the role of the Standards Committee, and that is set out at page 414 at the bottom there, where it now has a role in actually reviewing disciplinary decisions made by the fire service and the delegated power. That coming back from the review into the South Wales Fire Authority, where that was a failing within the fire authority there, that they did not member input into this, and it was felt that the Standards Committee ticked the boxes not only of having member input but also independent members as well, so they can keep an eye as to what's going on. They can't interfere in the decisions are anonymised, but nevertheless feedback can be given to the service as to the quality and steps that should be taken in order to make sure that valid and good decisions are made in terms of disciplinary matters, and that's done on a 6-month rolling programme where reports are brought to Standards Committee. So again, trying to be a little bit ahead of the game, if you like, in terms of the work of the Standards Committee there. Over the page 416 there, we had the first hearing, really a full-blown hearing of the Standards Committee on the 17th of May 2023. I won't rehearse the full details of it. It involved a former councillor with the fire authority, Councillor Tim Van Rees, and really, without going into too much detail, he really overstepped the mark in terms of his role as a councillor. He tried to interfere in operational matters. That's a no-go from members' point of view. You should stand back and let professional officers to get involved in that. And accordingly, as a result of his interference, which I'm sure was done from the highest motives to try to ensure things were done correctly, nevertheless, he found himself in breach of the code of conduct that they are set out on page 416 there for you. And at the end of that process, the Standards Committee felt that he should be censured for his actions there. So that was the first time we got involved. I'd like to think that the Standards Committee did a fine job in stepping up to what was quite a difficult issue, not least for his length of service and his age and what have you, but also the serious interference in the objective roles of a councillor on the fire authority. So a difficult balancing act, but I think the Standards Committee came through that. Similar meetings then, alternative meetings going on throughout the year then, looking at where we are with other standards committees in Wales. Each fire authority obviously has a standards committee, but also each constituent authority does. And receiving feedback from the adjudication panel for Wales and from the Public Services Ombudsman, giving them an idea as to what's been going on within constituent authorities. And again, some of you may be more familiar with that than others as to any infringement of the code of conduct within your own constituent authorities. And again, what we're hoping to do, if you look on, that they're hoping to be an all-Wales standards conference as well, probably in the new year, where representatives of the Standards Committee can come together, share good practice with other authorities and fire authorities as well, to make sure that a high level of standards compliance in Wales is maintained. And I'd like to think that is the case. I think we are certainly standards bearers, no pun intended, for good practice and good probity. Whereas in England, I don't think that they can justifiably say that. And they look to the standards regime in Wales, I think, with some degree of envy. Really, that's all I'd like to say, Chair, on behalf of Mr. Veal. Sadly, he's not able to with us today, but in the interests of spontaneity, I might throw it over to Councillor Roderick. Have you got any comments to make as the only member of the Standards Committee on the Fire Authority at the moment, I think, with us today?
Chair, there's nothing I can enlarge on after David coming in, so I'll be quickly.
I don't remember that, sorry. Yeah, do we need to test better? Sorry. This is the statement. Hwna'n gwybodaeth, bod cynghorydd Gareth Thomas a'r pwyllgor yma, yn ei drostodd rhai o'r dilyn sydd y fe. Felly, yn si, mynach chi fawr o'r pwyllgor bretho. Ond y beth sy'n cofio ar ôl y trafodaeth yna, oedd rhyw fath o pryder gyda gweithwyr ar alwad, bod yna rhywfaint o risg achos mae'n anodd i cael pobl cenwyr swyddi yma. A wedyn yr llygell gwaith achos hynny, mae yna ryw beryg bod ni'n cymryd pobl lan a felly fydd yn delfrydol i'r swydd. Felly mae hwnna'n mi achosi'r beth. Felly rhyw broblem yn sgil hynny. Dyna'r beth dwi'n ffogio'n glir o'r pwyllgor nes i fynd ato yn y crysau'r bethau. A sa'n os yn ateb hwnna. Ond mi'n gwybod na beth oedd yn taro fi ar ôl y trafodaeth. So hwnna'n i fawr o risg i ysfectol o'r mae'n gynnar. Okay,
thank you, Chair. Two comments. Obviously, I think we're looking at the previous Standards Committee and effect the membership of that. I'm not absolutely familiar with the role of, was it co-opted members you were discussing, or was it members of the fire service itself, the issue?
No, just to do with difficulty in sort of appointing on-call fire staff. Because of that, the number of spectrum might be different. Because it's so difficult to get people to apply for these posts, and as a consequence, there's now the risk that sometimes you're employing people as on-call firemen who might not normally meet the threshold in terms of the standards required. Okay, that's the only issue that I remember clearly from the last meeting.
Thank you, Professor Shironi. I think it's sort of tangential point, because primarily the Standards Committee is about code of conduct, and that's for members. But I suppose you're looking at it from the point of the behaviour of staff and looking at that. I think I don't know if you must have.
Yeah, if I may, Mark, I think you may have been from the conversation we had around safeguarding and how the organisation was transitioning from the DBS check it was undertaken at the moment into the standard check, whereby there would be obviously the check is created for that, and there may be elements of individuals' backgrounds that may come to the surface. But we're progressing through that as an organisation. We're embarking in January on starting the revised DBS check procedure, and we've been very clear about the methodology we'll have to scrutinise any applications that come through from new members, or even when we go out to do the checks of existing staff members. So where there is a record of sorts that the DBS check will highlight, then we are very clear about the methodology we have then to make sure that we understand what that is and where that fits in with the individual's role within the organisation, as well as what we referred to earlier about the welfare support for individuals, if that's ever needed. But it may have been around that particular element about safeguarding checks, and where we as an organisation are now adopting the best practice, which is within national fire services, is derived from changes in legislation that came out in 2023, which we need to now invoke. I think it was around the DBS checks.
Okay, content. Chief, anything to add?
Yeah, I just want to, and it goes back to the point about how we manage and oversee discipline within the service, obviously up to a certain level. Brigade manager being slightly outside that, slightly different process, but clearly aligned to that as well. We now have a process whereby internal matters, obviously it's delegated authority to myself from a certain level down, and that's managed internally. But we have additional scrutiny. One came as part of the HMIC FRS Spotlight report, which came out after the issues identified in London Fire Brigade around the need to report in ongoing issues around gross misconduct or misconduct that impact on values within the organisation. You could argue that anything that impacts in misconduct would meet that threshold anyway. So we now report into Welsh Government on a twice yearly, 6 monthly basis, all redacted information. There's no private or personal information included in that. But the Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor, who reports obviously into the Cabinet Secretary, has oversight of our disciplinary processes, what the issue was, how we managed it, and what the outcome was. And we have had a clean bill of health in terms of that reporting there. We have now identified and implemented, as the clerk has alluded to, further oversight from the Standards Committee as well. So we have not only appointed members, but external stakeholders involved in the Standards Committee to oversee our how we are managing, again on a redacted basis. So in terms of your own reassurance of scrutiny of management discipline cases within the service, I hope that does provide more reassurance that we are open and transparent where we can do, obviously not sharing any personal private information as well. But the processes we've got in place are robust, fair and proportionate as well in that space. It does touch into what we expect in the new year now in January from our external cultural audit and feed into that process as well. But there may well be some issues raised of that as well. But hope you've got reassurance that we manage it appropriately and professionally as well.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Emmett. Dave, please indulge me.
Just a moment.
Yeah, but I'm going to ask you a question first. All right. 23-24.
Yeah.
Should we not have adopted and noted the changes to our fire authority members? That would have been done in May 24, wouldn't it?
I think this reflects the previous municipal year, so yeah.
Does it? Because this report.
It's got last year's membership.
Okay, and yet.
We're reporting this year.
And yet one of the meetings, because we don't note any meetings recorded in 2024.
Yeah, I think that would come through to next year's report.
And yet it reads October 23, the Standards Committee asked us to note the report to go to the December 23 meeting. So okay. Shouldn't this year have October 24? Okay, it's a typo. That explains it.
Probably a typo.
All right, sorry, forget me.
I will have a word with the chair of the Standards Committee first.
No, I just thought there was something like that. Hey, members, Standards Committee annual report. That the party note the Standards Committee annual report for 23-24. Members, proposer, seconder. Thank you. All in favour? Thank you. Those to the contrary? Good. And any abstentions? Thank you. The report has been noted. Thank you. Item 13 on the agenda is the draft annual report of the Independent Remuneration Panel for Wales 25-26. And this is again with our clerk, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a bit nervous. I'll bring in reports. Sit in next year. Hopefully this is all in order. Members should be familiar with this. It's been before members on a number of occasions, not least for the requirement to remind members to respond to the consultation on the report. I think by the 29th of November, so obviously that date has passed and members were able to respond to that. So basically the document set out at Appendix 1 there is the draft report setting out the recommendations for members of the Fire Authority. The actual increases in allowances and basic salaries there are put down on page 427. So members are aware of that, and that will then feed through by the actual determination of the IRPW into the next municipal year. Sad to say that the IRPW will be no longer with us in the new year. However, their functions, they will be wound up, as I understand it, and they will then be transferred to the Democracy and Boundary Commission, who will then undertake the function, amongst other things, of determining members' allowances and payments. So really, Chair, members have seen this before. They should be fully familiar with it, and really have got nothing to add other than hopefully members were able to make a contribution to the consultation process by the 29th of November. Thank you, Chair.
Members clear on the report? Anything? Are we happy to note the report? I have a proposer and a seconder in the room. All in favour? Those to the contrary? And I'm thinking the word abstentions. Okay, we've noted that report at item 13 on the agenda. Item 14 on the agenda is the draft policy for members' allowance scheme and claim forms. 455468 in your pack, and once again with the clerk monitoring officer.
Thank you, Chair. Again, this is really a sort of tidying up exercise. What you have in front of you is a draft policy, if you like, or a scheme for members' allowances and claim forms. It's been amended and updated and put into a more meaningful format, if you like, in order to bring it into line with what you probably have got within your own constituent authority, setting out what can be claimed, what are the rates for mileage allowances and various other entitlements, if you like, for members themselves, in particular regulating what can and cannot be claimed in relation to attendance at events, mode of travel, things of that nature. Not something that's hugely important, but nevertheless it recognises that members do, no pun intended, go the extra mile, do attend conferences, do attend events at stations, etc., and they're entitled to be remunerated for their expenses in so doing. But there is a balancing act there, obviously, to make sure that members don't turn up unannounced, or when they do turn up, it's not going to interfere with training or other exercises that may well be taking place at the premises themselves. And accordingly, there is an amendment to the existing practices and policies there at page 463 in particular, where not only have you got the availability of attending to carry out duties, etc., but if you are attending at premises, you should get prior agreement with the head of department or division to make sure that members are not turning up and then obviously detracting from the difficult issues that may well be taking place in terms of training and development at the fire stations themselves. I think Craig Flannery has been involved in this, doing some work on it. I don't know if you want to add to that, Craig.
No, nothing to add, just other than perhaps what the Chief has always said, which is absolutely invaluable. Members engaging their local fire stations, and we've facilitated a number of visits pretty much over the last 12 months, and more recently with newer members to the authority. I think this was just from an operational perspective. We had thrown quite a lot of training into our on-call teams over the last 6 months. Active bystander training, some DNI training, some changes to national operational guidance, and it was just a means to perhaps move some of those visits to the new year, and also to work with the divisional commanders to fit a timing around the thematic plan, so training is not impacted upon detrimentally. So hopefully that just helps a little bit, follows up to that email that was sent out. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. So really, it's fairly self-evident there. It's really an exercise in tidying up and bringing into line our policies at the Fire Authority and Fire Service with those of your constituent authorities. So happy to take any questions, Chair. Otherwise, if members could approve the report.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Members, we should be well aware of this, very similar to our local authorities. Has anybody got anything to comment? Yes, we do. Councillor Tina.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was just wondering, in view of what Fire Officer Flannery just said, is when would the visits be commencing again, recommencing, because I've not been to a fire station, so I'm new to the authority, so it'd been really good for me to have a visit as soon as possible, really, without obviously interrupting anything that you've got planned. Thank you.
Yeah, and Councillor Higgins, we spoke last year, didn't we? I don't think you could make it at that time. So if you reach out to me, happy to put you in touch with Andy Davis and to get that expedited for yourself. I know a couple of other councillors who are new to the authority. We did manage to build in a visit fairly quickly for them. So yeah, happy to look at that in the new year when it's convenient for yourself and convenient to the watch in Ammanford. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Good. Well done, Councillor Tina. That's item 14 on your agenda. If there's no further comment, I'm going to ask you to note and approve the adoption of this document. Policy. Good words. There was a question coming up there, was there? Or was that with a proposer? Okay, I'm looking for a proposer and a seconder. Yeah, Councillor Andrew, Councillor Edwin. And all in favour? Good. To the contrary? Thank you. And any abstentions? There we go. That document is approved. Thank you. We now go to a verbal update at item 15 on the authority's responsibility in relation to the GDPR. Stephen, welcome to our meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Prynawn to everyone in the room and online as well. My name is Stephen and I'm the Data Protection Officer for Mid and West Wales Fire and Rescue Service. So I'm just going to take this opportunity to give you as FA members a very short security briefing in relation to data protection. Some of the actions required and some of the outcomes that we're going to implement moving forward. As you're aware, every public sector organisation is under scrutiny, and quite rightly so. But some may argue that the level of scrutiny is sometimes used to cause harm or distress into an organisation, its employees and its members. So we then must lead by example and ensure that scrutiny is welcomed and all our data protection policies and processes be robust in delivery. So today's briefing isn't a rehash of data protection training. It's an awareness session. I'm very confident that you've already received data protection from your respective councils as well. It's an important brief on how we ensure the confidentiality, the integrity, and the accurate availability of information, whether it contains PII, which stands for Personal Identifiable Information, or not. As you may be aware, the term data breach is often used in the media and can be seen more and more in our everyday lives. Everybody in the room has a mobile device with the potential for data breaches. But I just want to highlight the easiest and most simplistic way to ensure accidental breaches do not occur. That includes information that we regard at Mid and West Wales as valuable to the organisation. So part of my role as the service DPO is to ensure the confidentiality, the integrity, and to ensure that accurate information is correct. So we have what we call a single point of failure, and unfortunately it's an email address. Organisations, public sector, private sector, are all finding out that email addresses are posing a major threat into each organisation. So what we are doing at Mid and West Wales is we're rolling out training on basic threats to the organisation. And as I said, the number one single point of failure in most public sector organisations, especially in Wales, is that of an email. So just to go through the benefits of rolling out this briefing is to have an aligned and aware approach that all staff can adopt and adhere to. Keeping things simple and pragmatic and easy to understand, which is so important within data protection. As controllers of data and information, whether that's personal or more generalised information, what we call as assets valuable to the organisation, everybody in the room today is classed as an information asset user, and some in organisations are classified as information asset owners. Now, there is a key difference. Owners decide how best information is collected, stored, processed and shared, and users comply with these policies to ensure the correct collection, storage, processing and sharing. So as the Service Data Protection Officer, I would like to work with every Fire Authority member to ensure we move forward communicating with all Mid and West Wales assets through what we call the correct channels. So what I'd like to suggest is that we use our allocated Mid and West Wales Fire and Rescue Service email addresses only. As an organisation, we are under scrutiny as being one of the public sector organisations, and we are scrutinised by the Information Commissioner's Office. More specifically, they look at how we manage our information assets through electronic communications. I'm fully aware that this is not the current arrangement that we have in place, and all Fire Authority members use their respective council email addresses. This does potentially cause us some organisational risk moving forward. I just want to give you some examples of that, if I may, today. Two ways that we currently may not be complying with the current legislation is if we're subject to Freedom of Information or EIR requests, or if we're subjected to subject access requests from employees or ex-members or people from the service. So if we communicate information to you via your council email addresses that contain information requestable and disclosable under these categories above, we may be subject to enforcement actions and potential fines from the regulatory body. We're also not upholding our own information asset responsibilities when it comes to confidential information. So if we are subject to these actions above, it would be appropriate to engage with the receiving organisations, which is every council. In that case, it would be the council's responsibility to ensure we have the consent to release and request information, which could be a prolonged approach. So a very simple example could be Mid and West Wales Fire and Rescue Service send confidential communications to FA members using external council email addresses. Now, as information asset owners, we lose what we call the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of that information. We have no available information if an email is forwarded to another email address. Therefore, we lose the integrity and cannot prove accurate information is being sent to other users. If we send only to Mid and West Wales Fire and Rescue Service email addresses as IAOs, we would have the visibility of comms if they lose their integrity and are forwarded externally. This allows us as data controllers to maintain control of what we class sensitive information. Another example could be is when an FA member leaves their role. If we allocate a Mid and West Wales Fire and Rescue Service email address, this can be closed and controlled once the FA member has left the position. Currently, we do not have that process in place to retrieve the information that has been sent to an external account. So as IAOs, we are organisationally, what we do is we create a map of all the data that the service has, how valuable and critical that information is to the service, and who we share that information with. So currently we do not have any agreements in place with your organisation, but we share what we class as critical information. So that does pose a little bit of a threat. Now, I'm fully aware that this does pose a change of practices for you as FA members, and what I'd like to propose today is that we can reassure you that we can support you in making this change from using your respective council email addresses over to your Mid and West Wales allocated addresses. So what we will do, so we can update, if we need to, any code of conduct for FA members to specifically state that all internal comms from Mid and West Wales will be delivered to the allocated email address. We can also support you by accessing your Mid and West Wales email addresses. We can work with IT. Also, Harold and myself can be on hand to support you to achieve that as well. I've spoken to ICT, and we have the help desk available to help each and every member access and be able to use their Mid and West Wales Fire and Rescue Service email addresses moving forward. Going into the new year, we've spoken to ICT as well. We are going to implement multi-factor authentication, which again will come with training if needed. And as I said, just like to reassure any member that if you need any help, support, any questions, please utilise myself as a point of contact, where I can help you in accessing your emails if required. So as I say, it's a very short brief into data protection and potential security risks by using an external email address. But I'd just like to open the floor up if anybody has any questions or concerns, if that's okay.
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, it's great to have that explanation. And Councillor Linden has got a question for you.
Well, fine. When would you like this to sort of happen from? Really, number one, and secondly, obviously, I haven't got access to that email, my email address. get. So yeah, would like that advice on how to do that, and otherwise everything's fine, you know, because I do a similar thing, for example, with as a governor of a comprehensive school. So we have a separate hub email address for that, and I use an authenticator to get in. So it's probably very similar, I would have thought.
Okay, just to answer that, I think if I can ask it, Harold, if it's okay, if anybody has any concerns about how they can access their Mid and West Wales Fire and Rescue Service email addresses, is to direct that through Democratic Services to Harold, who can then liaise with myself to support you.
Good. Anybody else got anything queries really?
Are we being allocated an email address yet?
I think most members have, Councillor Andrew, but whether you...
So new members that have joined, you've all got an email address, but because we haven't been using them, you've not been set up properly yet to use it. So we're going to roll them out well at the same time.
Yeah, an opportunity to resolve anyway, Councillor Andrew. Councillor John.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm patently aware of the reasons behind it, and I accept that. Since we have as many lives in emails these days as we have the lives of cats. There are so many, you know, every life we lead has a different email, and it means a significant discipline in that regard. Can I ask you, therefore, to assist you, that you write an idiot's guide, and I'm speaking on myself, of how we once again access this email process. I think that's patently important. Secondly, is it possible, because I have in the past dipped in and out, is it possible that we are not on the same regime as all staff? That is, because every time I go in, 90% of what's there I don't need to know about. And therefore, on that basis, you just unblock delete. And sometimes you'll delete something that you should have kept. So rather than go fishing through acres and acres of emails, which would be of no relevance to us because we're not staff members, I don't know how you do it, but you may want to filter us out in that regard. Because as one has also attempted to access payroll in the past, that's an absolute nightmare. So we need a system that is user-friendly. Otherwise, you're going to have 25 members who are not going to be doing what you expect us to do.
24.
Yes, there's various ways you can do that. I think a blanket situation doesn't suit. So it'll be an individual request, how the best way you'd like to access your emails. If there's a working practice you want to put in place, you can highlight if an email is confidential, if it's high risk, if it's important. There are ways that can be addressed as well. So yeah, it's on an individual basis, I feel would serve us best if we discuss those on a unique basis. But to answer the question, yes, we can put an idiot's guide, for a better word, in place where we can advise you and give you the best practice of accessing your emails. And it is, I know from my perspective, a data protection officer, it's very, very important to the organisation that nothing sensitive is external from the service, and you're all members, you're integral to the part of the running of the service. So I think it's only important that we use the correct channels, and we are under scrutiny from external bodies and members of the public as well. So we should be doing things and leading by example.
Chief.
Councillor Griezmann.
All right, Councillor Kim, sorry.
Thank you. Yes, it's sort of I've had the email, Fire Authority email for quite a while, so things do come through there, and I agree that there's quite a bit of operational stuff that perhaps we don't need. However, my concern is around the multi-factor authentication, because I certainly had problems accessing my payslips and P60s and having the MFA working. Because we're not based at fire stations, so there is an issue, I think, with that, because sometimes, you know, I was told, oh, if you go into a fire station, it'll work then, but obviously that's not, you know, we're not in as often as we could be, and having to wait to come in to get something to work is not ideal.
Okay, good point, Councillor Kim.
Can I answer that, sorry, very quickly?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Broom, just to reassure, I think the multi-factor authentication is for systems and services, not emails. So if you want to log into your email, which is an Outlook, you can do that from a mobile device, from your laptop, from your home Wi-Fi. You don't need currently a multi-factor authentication to access those emails. I think moving forward, ICT are looking at plans on how they implement and integrate this into emails, but I'm not the expert for that. That would be IT that can deliver that message.
We're going to go, Councillor, to Councillor Edwin.
Thank you. Bearing in mind, well, as a council, you know, there is an extra level of security as well going through VPN. Is there real need, you know, otherwise without sifting through a lot of emails which are not needed by us?
Simple answer is yes. Yeah, because we're sending communications externally. So even if you are the UN, NASA, doesn't matter, we're sending information to external bodies. So the ICO would look at us, we'd have to have the correct procedures in place.
I'm going to give the Chief the final word.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, listen, members, we do understand. So just from personal experience, I sit as a trustee for the Firefighters Charity. I was getting my emails through the service email. They've separated that now. Appreciate it, and a lot of you have a number of hats on, a number of different organisations, and it's just a feature of that data. And the effective, efficient, and legal management of data is so important these days. So we have to comply with this, as you understand. We will develop, John mentioned, idiot's guide. I was going to say dummies, but I don't know why both references are not particularly complimentary, but we will ensure that, and especially if you come into service, and there's always helpful you come here, we can actually do it, start on the desk, go through, set up the account, show how to get it, and we will endeavour to do our best to reduce the flow of information, things that are service related, and just to reduce that impact on you, because I get the same, you get all those information that are blindly going, and then, as you say, you end up deleting something you should have kept and that sort of thing. So let's reduce the traffic as best we can, and we're here to support you, recognising it is something we have to comply with, but let's make that transition as painless as possible. We're here to provide that support as well.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for that explanation. And I think, members, it's our duty to accept this and move forward. Let's accept the help and embrace it so that we can comply. And I'm sure we're all in agreement with that. So thank you, Stephen. Important update. Item 6 on your agenda is any other business. I'm not aware of any.
16, Chair.
16.
To start the meeting, it might not be popular. Yeah, certainly there are no urgent items.
Okay, it's that time of year, and I think it would be wrong of me if I wasn't to wish you, members, and your families and your friends, a very, very happy Christmas. Hope you have some time to enjoy it and have a very peaceful Christmas. I think it's particularly poignant for the fire service, so officers, fire service, and also some of our civilian staff as well. They will be working over Christmas. They'll be working hard to keep us safe, and I think on behalf of myself and the authority, we wish you a very, very peaceful Christmas, and we hope that they get to enjoy it as much as they can. We really do mean that, and we really do appreciate the work which you will do over Christmas, because we will be content in our homes that if needed, that service is there. So please pass on our good wishes to everybody connected with the service. Thank you very much. Members, thank you for your attendance today. Remind you that we do have a briefing this afternoon at 2 o'clock. So please, Midrian, sorry.
Yeah, Chair, I've put VW on notice. So if members felt that they'd like to have a quick comfort break and then come back into that call, happy to do that. You could finish earlier. Yeah. That would be suitable for you.
Yeah. One? Yeah, would that be acceptable online as well? Brilliant. Everybody's putting their hand up. Yeah, 1:30. 1:30. Okay, remind you of that, and if you can come in, I think it's quite important that you come in to